Hi guys, this is Hirosaki. This story is all about what if Naruto was in Hunter x Hunter, in which Konoha's beloved Jinchuriki finds herself in an odd new world with only Kurama by her side. He insists Biju bombs are the only way to fix this issue. Welcome aboard! Chapter 31, Lammergeier 4. The pretty cat ant had popped many of Miwa's clones. It let out tinkling laughter every time her clone disappeared in a puff of smoke. "Are you having fun?" asked one of Miwa's clones. "I think I am," said the cat ant with a Cheshire smile. "It's fun watching you," said the clone. Indeed. The chimera ant did not exude any type of malice. Or, rather, the type of aura that naturally leaked from it was a dead ringer for Kurama's default presence, albeit at a much tamer comparison. Phaeton had a similar bloodlust, but Phaeton actively sought hurting others. And, he was human, so his bloodlust could really only be so intense. Kurama, and now that cat ant, were creatures made up of something not from that world. Their presence was alien. The cat ant was on the same wavelength as Kurama, but nowhere near as intense. Still, for Miwa, who took great comfort in Kurama, anything that reminded her of him instantly endeared her. While the feline creature pounced upon the clones, it did so with the type of playfulness Miwa expected to find in kittens. It did not pay much attention to the clone that blatantly walked behind it, finding greater entertainment in hunting the ones that ran away or hid. "How many of you are there?" asked the cat. "Right now?" "Not that many left," she answered. "Although I could pop them all now." No. "Keep running, I love the chase." "All of them?" "You," said the cat, "can keep talking to me. Tell me about yourself." Me?" The clone's eyes widened. "You want to actually talk? It's not like I'd get any information from your dead body." The clone nodded in understanding. "It's hard to make the dead talk." "Right? Okay," said the clone. "How about we exchange names?" "Names," repeated the cat with a laugh. "I see. Neferpito. That is the name the queen gave me." "I'm Miwa," she introduced with a small curtsy. She was pleasantly surprised with how civil the pretty creature was. If they were capable and most importantly willing to converse with Miwa, then there was a chance they did not have to be enemies. In fact, there was a chance they could even become her friends, like Kurama. Miwa found she quite enjoyed making friends. I like your tail." Neferpito waved their tail as they found another one of Miwa's clones. Miwa's clones had stopped trying to run away, and instead started to hide. When Neferpito found one, it made a funny face at the cat ant before popping. Some faces made Neferpito laugh, the cat ant clearly delighting in the hunt. "This is called hide and seek," Miwa told them. "Hide and seek," repeated the chimera ant. "It's a game friends play." "What a fun game." "You're acting as the seeker right now." "I like being the seeker," said Neferpito as they found another clone and swiped at its head. "You're really good at it," approved Miwa. "You could be better though." "How so?" Try closing your eyes and using your other senses." "I'm assuming you've got a good sense of smell." Neferpito sniffed the air. "I smell a lot of things." "Focus on picking them out," advised Miwa. "Scents linger in the air, so you'll have a better time finding someone even if your day's behind them, versus looking for them with your eyes and ears." "Now I understand." Neferpito leapt to the clone's side, leaning in to sniff at her neck. What do you smell like?" "I don't recognize this scent." "I dunno," answered Miwa. "What do I smell like?" The clone sniffed at the chimera ant. Like apple-mint." "Apple-mint," Neferpito repeated in amusement. "I wonder." Neferpito reached forward and cupped the face of the clone. They pulled Miwa forward, turning her head and then dragging their tongue along her cheek. "You taste like you smell." Miwa's clone blushed bright red, flustered by Neferpito's actions. Then she processed what Neferpito said, and she excitedly exclaimed, "Wow, really? Can I lick you?" Neferpito's red eyes gleamed with mirth, and they offered their hand out to the clone, who promptly licked the back of it. "You taste like apple-mint," she gasped. Miwa had never considered the possibilities of people tasting like they smelled. She wondered if Gon would taste like lilies and ponds, and if Killua would taste like fresh snow and asphodel. She'd ask them later if she could test that theory out. Applemint, Neferpito said again, sniffing at their own hands. Now I'll keep an eye out for it. And for whatever you smell like. Okay, said Miwa with a smile. Say, how much do you know about Nen? A decent amount, answered Miwa. What about specialists? I'm actually a specialist myself, the clone answered brightly. Neferpito's eyes shined as they waved their tail. They reached out a clawed hand to cup Miwa's face. You won't mind answering more of my questions, would you? Don't see why not, said the clone. Miwa startled at the massive amount of information poured into her head from the last remaining clone. The clone had popped itself after losing a game of rock-paper-scissors with the cat ant. Neferpito, said Miwa, looking up at the sky and smiling to herself. I think there might be good chimera ants. Or at least ones that won't immediately try to kill us. Yeah. You know they kind of remind me of you, do they? Beings not from here, forced to fight humans, have a very similar presence. A lot of people would assume they're bad, but there's clearly potential. I hope I can meet that one again. Neferpito? I want to invite them to Soleil. You think that'd be a good idea? Well, yeah. 'Cause I made it a home for you. Yes? It's a home for anyone like you. If there's even a tiniest bit of you in these ants, then it's their home, too, if they'll have it. The morning light filtered through the leaves in the trees, gently awakening Killua and Kite. Killua was the first to wake up, his pale eyes coming into focus immediately. Miwa stopped playing with his bangs when she realized he was awake. She placed her hand on his cheek. Are you okay? Fine, he mumbled. Did the ant follow us? No, she said. Is your neck okay? My lap couldn't have been that comfortable. It's fine, he assured her, sitting up and popping his neck. After a pregnant pause, he mumbled, thanks. Miwa leaned into him, pressing her forehead against his back. MN. What are friends for? There was a small groan from beside them as Kite woke up. He sat up slowly, rubbing at the back of his head as he looked around. What happened to the ant? Kite asked. I played with them, Miwa answered. They didn't follow us. Kite looked down at the snoozing Gon. And Gon? I panicked when I hit him. I don't know when he'll wake up, admitted Killua. Then, let's use this time to regroup. We're outside the country? Yeah, answered Miwa. I teleported us here. Teleported? Kite said in surprise. Good call. That thing was in a league of its own. Oh, and, thank you. I owe you my life. Miwa's ears burned. Don't mention it. Kite smiled kindly at her. Killua stood up, brushing off the grass that clung to him. He nodded down the road. Looks like we'll have company. Miwa yawned and rubbed at her eyes. Company. Kite stood up, his eyes narrowed as he looked at the oncoming car. I called your team, Miwa explained. Although I didn't expect them to send anyone. Then again, Miwa hadn't told Kite's team that she could teleport. Only that one of the ants they had encountered forced them to retreat. Kite and Gon were unconscious, and Miwa was going to stay at the country's entrance to see if the ant pursued them. Spin, who had answered the phone call, told her to sit tight. Ah, said Miwa upon recognizing one of the scents in the upcoming car. A few minutes later the car stopped before them and out stepped three men, the first being Netero, the hunter chairman. He was exactly the same as when Miwa last encountered him. The second was a sharply dressed man in a black suit and tie with combed-back black hair and glasses. He smelled like fresh linen, and his core felt clinical yet fragile. Like a glass hospital. The man right behind them was large with broad shoulders. He had darker skin than his previous companions, sunglasses, and loose white hair that fell to his shoulders. He smelled like lavender and smoke, and his core reflected that. Hey Kite. Got some kids with you, I see, said the man of smoke and lavender. Morel, Kite greeted politely. It's good to see you again. This is Gon, Killua, and Miwa. Miwa nodded her head in greeting. Killua uneasily shifted his weight behind her, shoving his hands in his pockets. You never showed up to my dojo, said Netero. I've been busy, she retorted. Netero laughed. I noticed. Soleil, huh? Miwa beamed with pride. You should come visit. I think I will, he said. I've heard reports it's a paradise. A surge of fierce joy pierced Miwa's heart. Her entire expression lit up like the dawn, her eyes shining brilliantly. Grandfather's hand was big and warm as he placed it atop her head. His office smelled of smoke and tobacco. Sometimes the smell made her nose twitch and itch, and she would sneeze. Grandfather always laughed and apologized to her as he patted her head. He was a busy man, but never too busy to turn her away. Some called him evil or cruel. Some would whisper he was a cold and unforgiving man. She did not begrudge him that, though, because it was his job. He had a lot of people to protect. Ah! Are you excited to start the academy? You'll be good? He patted her head again. That's my girl, Grandpa, she whispered to him. I have a secret to tell you. A secret? He asked in amusement. She beckoned for him to move closer. He bent down to humor her. I love you, she told him. He could be a cold man, but he was always so warm to her. I love you, too, Mawako. Miwa exclaimed. I'll take you there whenever you want. I'll give you a grand tour. Netaro smiled at her. The man in glasses cleared his throat. Chairman? Ah, right, Kite, would you please update us on the situation? Asked Netaro, turning to address Kite. Yes, said Kite. He took a deep breath, then started to accurately recount the events prior. Finding the claw, investigating its origin, the destruction of NGL's underworld, fighting the ants, right up until the encounter with Neferpitou. He admitted, I only saw that ant for a few seconds before Miwa teleported us away. And what did you think of that ant? Inquired Netaro. Kite hesitated. I hope it is one of the royal guards. We'd be in trouble if it was only a squad leader. That powerful? Morel probed. I don't think I could handle it on my own, said Kite. I don't think anyone short of the chairman could. Morel whistled lowly. Not even the Zodiacs? Kite shook his head. Too much of a risk. I know there's no way to guarantee a certain outcome, but if I were to go off my gut instinct, it's not to be taken lightly. Netaro stroked his beard. And you, Killua? Killua flinched. The last one we encountered could use Nen. It had the worst aura I've ever felt. Worse than my brother's. Worse than Hisoka's. Now that I've learned Nen myself, I can tell you guys are amazingly strong. But I still can't see you defeating that thing. Netaro stroked his beard again. Miwa? Miwa shrugged. I don't know? It didn't seem that strong. It's hard to compare off just cores alone. In terms of size, the ant's raw core strength would be around the same level as the three of you combined. Miwa gestured to Netaro, Morel, and the man in glasses. But they were only just born, so they have no combat experience. It'd be like fighting a wild animal. A clever one, mind you, but still an animal. She shifted her weight to the back of her heels as she thought about playing with Neferpitou. Although, maybe there's a chance to avoid combat? What do you mean? Miwa chewed on the inside of her cheeks. Can I think about it some more and get back to you? Sure, he said. Analysis isn't something that should be rushed anyway. Thank you. Netaro let out an acknowledging noise. Well then. Kite, are you coming with? Yes, he said. Netaro turned away, walking toward the entrance of the country. Morel and the other hunter joining him shortly. Kite nodded toward Miwa and Killua and said, I'm sure Gon will want to join us, but... We sent 2 assassins to the nearest village, Netaro cut in as he continued to walk away. The man lifted 2 wooden tokens and threw them back at Killua, Miwa, and the sleeping Gon. Killua caught both of them. It's up to you whether you want to fight, but you must defeat them before you can come. If you wish to live as a hunter, we are not desperate for help. We only seek the strong. Kite's lips twitched. Never mind, then. I should have known he'd have something prepared. Take care, Killua, Miwa. Bye-bye, said Miwa. Bye-bye, echoed Killua. The next town was a quaint place with brick streets, brick houses, and a lot of yummy-smelling foods. Miwa and Killua checked into a small inn to wait for Gon to wake up. Miwa was impressed how hard Killua must have slapped Gon to knock him out for so long. She hoped her friend didn't have a headache from the ordeal. While Gon rested, Killua surveyed the town to try and find out more about the assassins. He returned in the late afternoon, telling Miwa he found that the assassins had left a message for them on the public board. He was tossing the tokens up and down with one hand as he took a seat on their bed. Gon let out a small snore before rolling over. Miwa watched him toss the tokens. Why are there only 2 tokens? Isn't a 3v2 kind of unfair? Probably not meant for you to participate in, Miwa, Killua blandly responded. Miwa frowned at that, uncertain if she should be happy Netero already thought she was strong enough, or upset that she was excluded from something. Suddenly, Gon sat up with a "H-ish-ish." Ah! Miwa squeaked, startled. Her heart leapt up to her throat. Oh, yay, it worked, said Gon with a big smile. What war, you were trying to scare me? Miwa demanded. Yeah, he said. How long have you been awake? Couple of hours, he said, a twinkle in his eyes. Thank you for singing me a lullaby. Miwa glared, reached forward, and pinched his cheeks. She spread his cheeks apart. You jerk. Ow, ow, ow. Killua, help. Killua pointedly looked away and started to whistle. It didn't take long to catch Gon up to speed after Miwa stopped stretching his face, and of course he wanted to take up the challenge. He was excited to rejoin Kite and fight the ants. He practically dragged Killua out of the room to go find the assassins and fight them. As long as they're happy, she thought, watching them leave. Meanwhile, she'd go hunt down their dinner. Miwa found a neat-looking local shop where she ordered food to go. To Killua and Gon. Formed group message with Gon and Killua. Message, Miwa, I found a nice little shop. They do take out. I'll send a picture of their menu shortly. Let me know what sounds good and I'll bring it back to our room. Smiley face. Message, Miwa, uploaded picture. Message, Gon, sad face. Message, Miwa? Message, Gon, you TXT like kill now. Message, Miwa, is that bad? Message, Gon, crying face. Message, Miwa, how do you want me to text? Message, Killua, how she texts is fine. It's how people should text. Message, Gon, I licked at BTTR when she DD into use GRMMR. Message, Miwa. Message, Killua, Miwa, don't. Message, Gon, crying face. Message, Gon, it was. Message, Gon, cute, smiley face. Message, Miwa, laughing face. Message, Killua, NO. Message, Miwa, CNEANW. Message, Killua, stop. Message, Gon, go go go. Message, Miwa, food. Message, Killua, I hate you both. Message, Miwa, crying face. Message, Gon, crying face. Message, Gon, that's KWCN like each other, smiley face. Message, Miwa, smiley face. Message, Killua. Message, Miwa, Gon. Message, Miwa, DNN. Message, Gon, Oki. Message, Gon, GT me the calzones. Message, Miwa, K. Message, Miwa, kill. Message, Killua, the tortellini, please. Message, Miwa, K. Message, Miwa, I go. Message, Miwa, see again. Message, Miwa, love you. Message, Gon, love you too. Message, Killua. Message, Miwa, kill. Message, Miwa, love you. Message, Gon, love you kill. Message, Killua. Message, Miwa, love. Message, Gon, lovey. Message, Killua, love you too. When Miwa returned to the inn with their food, Killua and Gon were waiting for her. Food smells great, exclaimed Gon as Miwa handed him the box of calzones. Hope it tastes good, too, she said. Probably will, said Killua. Listen. Killua explained that while he and Gon were looking for more information on the assassins, they had encountered a woman named Palm. She explained that she was the student of Nav, the black-haired man with glasses that accompanied Netero, and that Nav would not allow her to assist in the expedition unless Killua and Gon defeated Morel's students. Morel's students were the ones who had the other tokens. The 2 assassins were in fact other hunters. Killua and Gon promised to meet up with Palm to discuss a better plan of attack tomorrow morning. Should be fun, said Miwa with a smile. Gon's eyes were sparkling with pure joy at the thought of the upcoming challenge. Killua wasn't as overtly happy as Gon, yet there was a glimmer of happiness in his gaze. Seeing her friends enjoying themselves made Miwa's heart warm and her tummy filled with butterflies. I love them, she thought. She really did. She loved Gon and Killua so much. So filled with her love, she couldn't resist pulling the two boys into a hug and kissing their cheeks and foreheads. Killua pushed himself out of her arms, his face beet red. St, stop that. Oh, sorry. Forget him, said Gon, leaning into her. I love affection, you can do that whenever you want. She giggled. Good. 'Cause I think I love giving it. Why, you have no shame, muttered Killua. What is this word you speak of? Gon said with a mockingly innocent smile. Shame? What's that? Killua shoved the calzone in Gon's mouth. Shut up and eat, you brazen idiot. As promised, Gon, Killua, and Miwa headed out to meet with Palm. Palm had rented out a room at another inn across town. We only have a month to complete the task, said Killua. We'll do it in a week, declared Gon as the trio reached Palm's door. The door opened up, and a small blonde girl abruptly punched Gon square in the face. Idiot! Miwa caught Gon before he hit the floor, surprised and flustered by the sudden attack. The person who hit him had no killing intent. Rather, the smack reminded her of. You idiot, roared the pinkette. I literally just stitched you up and you went training? I love you? I am going to kill you. Miwa felt an odd phantom pain at the top of her head that made her simultaneously nostalgic and tense. Bisky! Gon and Killua exclaimed together. What are you doing here? A blonde girl in a braided ponytail stepped out. She was in a cute fluffy pink outfit. She placed her hands on her hips in a very scolding manner, her pink eyes narrowed. Miwa called her a girl, but her core felt too old. Perhaps not as old as Netero's, but certainly older than Kite's. It felt like a polished gemstone, shiny, sturdy, and like it had been compressed to near perfection over the years. She even smelled like a crystal cave. I called her here, rasped a wavering voice of a woman behind Bisky. Wow, thought Miwa. The woman behind Bisky had messy, long black hair that covered most of her face. Miwa could tell she was a tall woman, but because her shoulders were hunched, she appeared much smaller than what she actually was. Small and insecure, hiding behind her hair. She looked frail, and had a very odd gleam in her eyes. It was the type of look Miwa had seen in some obsessive members of her city. Her core certainly felt sticky. Clingy. Suffocatingly so. It wasn't a bad thing, per se. What's the term? Yandere? Yep. Gon and Killua, still in sync, asked, You two know each other? The woman shook her head. No, I looked into your backgrounds. How? Gon's brow furrowed. We only know Bisky because. The woman let out an eerie chuckle. Once I used my power, it was quite simple. Now there's no time to spare. Let's begin the plan to slaughter Morel's disciples. No, they said. Bisky sniffed. Get in, boys. Gon and Killua winced, ducking around Bisky to enter the hotel room. You must be Miwa, said Bisky with a smile. I've heard a lot about you. Hello, said Miwa as she gave a respectful bow. Thank you for looking after them in Greed Island. Oh my. So polite. What's a cute girl like you doing being with those boys? See cute? Miwa's heart thumped in her chest, her eyes widening. Her whole face felt hot, and she nervously fidgeted with her hair. She couldn't hold back her shy smile. Ee-hee-hee-ya. Killua looked pained. Get inside, Miwa. Ee-hee-hee-ya. Miwa lightly stepped around Bisky. Once she was inside, Bisky closed the door behind her. Brusquely, she instructed the boys, Go ahead and begin. OSU, they said, gathering their nen. And you? Bisky asked. Are you going to train with them? Miwa fiddled with her hair. No? Bisky cocked her head. All right. If you change your mind, you're welcome to join them. Thank you. I have a few things I want to take care of first, she said. I'll be back later. Bye-bye. Bye-bye, Gon and Killua said. Why not train in Nen? Arrogance? Self-confidence, you mean? Sure. And I want to work on something related to chakra. Oh, an idea I thought up of for a new technique. I had a dream about it. I'll have to go somewhere far away to test it out, it's pretty damaging. How damaging? Biju bomb level? Good kit. Before Miwa headed off to train, she thought about sending a clone to check up on the cat ant. Miwa was tempted to go herself, but that was ultimately a needless risk. She wanted to assess the ants herself. While the majority of the ants hadn't impressed her, she wasn't put off by all the gore after her time fighting the deranged residents of Meteor City. Neferpito had caught her interest. Neferpito showed a sincere willingness to not immediately be enemies. Perhaps not allies, but Miwa couldn't ask for much more of a better start. It wasn't like she was friends with Kurama right away. He hated her at first, and if he had been able to without consequence, he probably would have killed her. Miwa didn't really care if people tried to kill her. It bothered her when people tried to hurt Gon or Killua, but she had been getting better about that. They needed to fight stronger people to get stronger, and she knew that meant people would try to kill them. They wanted that. She had to respect that, no matter how much it irked her. Empathy for other lives was difficult for Miwa. For some reason, death didn't really perturb her. If she was being entirely honest, death for Gon and Killua only bothered her because it meant she couldn't be with them. That was it. Everyone died. That was fine. Whether they were killed by a chimera ant for food or tripped and broke their neck, it was all the same to Miwa. She was a hunter, after all. She had taken so many lives she lost count. What right did she have to judge another hunter? So, she had nothing against the ants for slaughtering humans for food. The only mark against them was that Killua got scared of one of them. She wondered why. Because of the aura. Aura? She had noticed Gon and Killua were sensitive to auras, emotions reflected in nin/chakra. When she had introduced Kurama to Gon and Killua, she had smothered his aura with her own and made sure to dilute his chakra as much as possible. She was exceedingly careful in using her own chakra whenever the two were around out of fear for how they would react to Kurama's chakra/aura. The few times she used his chakra, she made sure to override his presence with hers so they wouldn't feel his aura. Miwa had noticed that the cat ant had a wee bit of it. Evil seemed wrong, but bloodthirsty seemed too tame. Something in between? An amped-up version of Phaeton's bloodlust, but tamer than Kurama's default presence. Miwa hadn't really been fazed by it because she was so used to feeling Kurama's constant malice. She acknowledged it was there and it did make her think of her best friend, but she hadn't considered the thought of that bothering Killua so much he'd knock out Gon. Good thing I've never let them feel your aura without masking it under mine. You should. No. I don't want them to be afraid of you. They should be. Don't be silly. What do you think of the ants so far? Haven't encountered enough to form an opinion. Their origin has my interest, but nothing more. I suppose I'm more interested in how the stronger humans will treat them. Humans tend to have adverse reactions to their predators. Can't expect them to be docile prey, can you? No. Is coexistence possible? I wonder. Do you think it is? We coexist. We're family. Yes. Welp. That double settles it then. Settles what? Miwa decided to send a clone out to interact with the cat ant. Let's find out, can we be friends? Or do we have to be enemies? Only one way to know for sure, and that's giving it an honest try. They'll try to kill you. Repeatedly. And you wouldn't in their place? I would succeed in their place. He. What? Nothing. You're just really cute. I love you. Miwa felt Kurama's chakra fluctuate in a way she recognized as him being flustered. She could perfectly imagine him pressing his ears back flat and his tails curling anxiously. You're an idiot. Amen. Miwa's clone. Neferpito, Miwa greeted, teleporting to the cat ant. Looky. I found it, Neferpito whispered, appearing behind Miwa and grabbing her shoulders. They pulled Miwa back, then dragged their tongue along her cheek. Yes. You taste and smell exactly like sunshine, ash, and that flower. Miwa's cheeks turned bright red. You Neferpito giggled, pulling away. Ah, long time no see. I knew it. You can teleport? You teleported away that night and only let me play with clones. Is this a clone? Miwa shook her head. She held up a bundle of apple mint. Apple mint. My smell. Your smell. Neferpito accepted the bundle, sniffing at it. Now I see. This is my smell. Not bad, not bad. Do you want to play again? Asked Miwa. Hide and seek? Hmm. That was a lot of fun. Neferpito trailed off. But I have to guard. I can't leave. Instead, Neferpito tiptoed around Miwa, their movements graceful and playful. Do you want to see the power I developed? Neferpito asked, red eyes gleaming with dark mirth. I made it just for you. For me? Miwa's blue eyes widened. Really? What is it? A power designed to catch you, hold you, break you, and fix you back up. Neferpito laughed in delight. Wow. I can't believe someone made a power just for me, said Miwa brightly. Oh no. Neferpito clapped their hands together. Yes, shall we play with it? Sure. Miwa. Late in the evening, Miwa returned from her various tasks. After she had sent out her clone, she checked up on her city. She had a lot of stamping to do. Who knew paperwork could pile up so much? She got to enjoy lunch with Nobunaga and Shelnurk, though, which was very nice. Done with that, she trained/prepped for her new super awesome technique that she couldn't wait to use. When night had fallen, she went back to their shared hotel room, unsurprised to find Gon and Killua still training. Bisky was reading a magazine with pretty boys on it, and Palm was eerily watching them from the kitchen. Gon sniffed at the air when Miwa returned. Why do you stink? I was making tar, she said, reflexively wiping at her mouth. She hated making tar, the taste always lingered in her mouth even if she used Suetun techniques afterwards. Killua frowned. Why were you making tar? To dunk rocks into. They stared at her and in perfect sync asked, why? Because one day it'll look really cool. Gon smiled. I hope I can see it then. Miwa beamed. I hope so too. Chapter 32, Lammergeier v. Miwa's clone. Neferpito's ability was pretty gosh darn neat, and a little terrifying. Neferpito was able to conjure various marionettes, each one with a different ability. The one currently summoned shot out dozens of nin threads to try and capture the fleeing clone. Gah, said Miwa, leaping away as she barely dodged the non-threads. Neferpito giggled. Gah, the cat ant mocked. It's hard to dodge, I can barely see them, exclaimed Miwa. Thank you. You should try to thin them out more, advised Miwa. It'll be even harder then. Oh. Now I see, yes. You know they could be a potential enemy? Or they could be a potential best friend. Why are you like this? Like what? An optimist. You're becoming more and more like that damn Gon. That's not so bad, is it? Faye. Eventually, Neferpito was able to catch the clone with their threads. Neferpito pounced upon Miwa with enough force to turn most humans into mush, consequently popping the clone. Miwa. For the next 3 days, each morning and night, Miwa would send a clone to Neferpito. The cat ant reveled in playing games with Miwa, although each game ended with the clone being caught and subsequently popped. The lethality of the games might have been concerning for some, but not Miwa. The fact that Neferpito was even willing to cooperate with Miwa in playing the games meant a lot to the Kunoichi. It meant that her efforts to befriend the ant weren't entirely pointless, that there was a possibility for peace. Or at least not complete genocide. While the clone played the ant, Miwa herself had to alternate between attending to her work in Soleil and training. The city was progressing each day, with laws being implemented and the civilians adapting to a less extreme lifestyle. There were some bumps and hiccups along the way, yet it was nothing Miwa couldn't handle. Krallo had told her that he would have to be departing in a couple of months to prepare for an agreed battle with Hisoka. Miwa thought that was silly, but she wasn't going to tell that to Krallo. With Krallo's departure, Miwa would have to keep a clone or two in the city to properly manage the bureaucracy. She didn't savor the idea of doing that every day, especially because she wanted to enjoy her adventures, so she started to gear the government to rely on her less. She wanted to limit her necessary overseeing to once a month or less. When Kurama inherited the city, she knew he would be at loath to handle paperwork. Therefore, her position had to be something closer to a symbol rather than an essential cog. Something reverent enough it would not be dismissed during Kurama's tenure, yet irrelevant enough that it wouldn't impede their desires. which meant she needed to fill in a lot more positions in the government with people who actually knew what they were doing. Step by step, she'd get her ideal outcome. If not at her city, Miwa was working on the new technique she had come up with. It'd take her some time to perfect it, but she thought it looked way too cool not to do it. In the late evenings, she'd enjoy dinner with Gon, Killua, Bisky, and Palm, the crazy lady. Miwa, Day 3 morning. From Kaluto. Message, elder sister, if you have a moment, would you please stop by for tea? 2. Kaluto. Message, I'll stop by around 3, is that okay? From Kaluto. Message, yes. Thank you. Miwa, Day 3 afternoon. Tea in the afternoon was exclusively with Kaluto. Kikyo, Kaluto had told her, was assisting their father on a job. She doesn't like to leave, but sometimes she has to, Kaluto told her after he took a sip of his green tea. No one knows technology like mother. Miwa believed that. Kikyo had an entire laboratory where she tinkered with all sorts of gadgets. Kikyo told Miwa that she had degrees in mechanical, computer science, electrical, industrial, and nuclear engineering. Miwa had asked her how she had time to go to school that often, and Kikyo laughed. I spent years without being able to learn anything. When I was finally able to, I couldn't stop. Can't stop, really. I'm working on a chemical degree now. Just something in between. Is that a new kimono? Asked Miwa. Kaluto smiled. Yes. I only finished making it last night. It's beautiful. Thank you, elder sister. Are you still enjoying yours? Yes, Miwa gushed. I love it so much. Sometimes I get distracted staring at it cause it's so pretty. Kaluto's eyes softened. I'm glad. He carefully set down his cup of tea. Elder sister, I have a favor to ask of you. Anything, she said. I would like you to introduce me to the Phantom Troop as a potential recruit, he said plainly. Miwa blinked. Pardon? Okay. May I ask why? Kaluto folded his hands neatly in his lap. Older brother Killua has only gotten stronger since leaving home. I also want to become stronger. I want to experience the world. You don't need to join the troop to do that, she pointed out. Perhaps, he said. But I feel that I should. They are strong and clever. I could learn from them. Miwa couldn't disagree with that. Okay. When do you want to go? Today, if possible. She smiled. Today it is. Kaluto's eyes shined. Thank you, elder sister. Anything for my cute little brother, she said cheerfully, eliciting another smile from Kaluto. I hope Killua won't get mad I'm calling Kaluto my little brother, too. Somehow, I doubt it. That made Miwa feel warm and fuzzy inside. Miwa, Day 3 evening. Miwa teleported to Kite, holding 2 crepes. She had not expected the other hunters to be with him. Hi, she said, drawing their attention to her. The 4 hunters were standing atop a cliff a fair distance away from the chimera ant nest. As they were downwind, Miwa could catch faint whiffs of the nest, along with her friend. She was getting better and better at picking Neferpito's scent out from the other ants. Hello, Miwa, Kite politely greeted her. What you got there? Asked Netero, blatantly eyeing the crepes. She said hesitantly, I thought Kite would be by himself. I brought some crepes to eat. But I can get some for you guys as well. Do you have a favorite flavor? Bananas and chocolate, please and thank you, Netero said happily. I won't say no to a sweet treat, agreed Morel. All the toppings for mine. That's a little excessive, chided Morel, adjusting his glasses. I'll gladly accept a plain vanilla one. That's boring, Morel scoffed. Miwa handed one of the strawberry cheesecake crepes to Kite. I'll be right back. Thank you, said Kite as Miwa teleported. Thankfully her favorite crepe vendor was a speedy master and had them all ready within a minute. Miwa returned, handing each of the crepes to the hunters. These are from Soleil, I take it? Netero asked after biting into his. Delicious. Yes, answered Miwa, puffing her up her chest in pride. I think they're the best crepes in the whole world. Have you had crepes elsewhere? Questioned Nav. 7 different cities, she said. They all come up short. Definitely not bad, said Morel, already almost done with his. Kite was a bit of a slow eater. How are Gon and Killua? Fine. They're training with Bisky, said Miwa, which made Netero chuckle. Netero glanced over the forest below them. Kite said, "It's good they're under her care. Do you know her?" "Bisky is someone not easy to forget once you've met her once," chuckled Netero. Did you finish your analysis, Miwa?" Actually, Miwa hesitantly began, I've been in contact with one of the chimera ants. The cat ant we encountered. Netero quirked an eyebrow. Oh, their name is Neferpitou. We've been playing games, explained Miwa. I think if given enough time, there might be a way that we can avoid genocide. Netero stroked his beard. That'd be good. If there is a solution that would avoid a fight, I'd prefer it. Are you able to get to the queen? Maybe? But that'd sour whatever friendship I'd built so far with Neferpitou, said Miwa. It's not even a guarantee to risk that. Netero hummed at that. Then I'll leave you to that. Keep us posted, however. Okay, she agreed to. It didn't feel like Netero was lying to her, and the fact that the chairman was actively avoiding genocide made her feel better about the situation. Most humans, Miwa knew, would immediately jump to complete extermination. The fact that he was considering alternative solutions despite the fact that the chimera ants had already killed hundreds of humans. Miwa liked that about him. He seems more like the type to prioritize his entertainment above human life. Why do you say that? I've lived long enough to spot the type. Is that a bad thing? Not for you or the ants. For the meat sacks being preyed upon? Sucks for them. Ha! Oh well. Not her country, not her problem. I can bring by food again tomorrow, she offered. I have heard some lovely rumors about Soleil's burgers, said Netero, raising his eyebrows. Miwa giggled. Miwa's clone, day 4 morning. Miwa teleported atop Neferpitou. Pito. Miwa. Neferpitou caught Miwa in their arms. Are you here to play? Asked the cat. Aren't I always? The clone returned. Who is this? Drawled a new voice. The voice belonged to a new ant. One with beautiful rainbow wings, a handsome face, soft pale hair, and 2 cute antennae poking out the top of his head. He was, undeniably, a beautiful man. Ant-man ant? Butterfly man ant? Pretty. He was pretty like Neferpitou. These ants sure make some lovely soldiers, thought Miwa, her eyes widening upon seeing the butterfly ant. Although his energy could not have been more different than Neferpitou's. Neferpitou was playful, coy, and sensitive. They were a cat through and through. The new ant's core was hypnotic. Like a bundle of sparkles thrown into a toxic gas cloud. Illuminating to see, but breathing it in was deadly. It was hard to define it. One spark could set the whole thing ablaze. Miwa could instinctively feel that he was dangerous. But gosh, was he pretty to look at. Miwa, said Neferpitou, this is Sheapuff. Sheapuff, this is my toy, Miwa. Human? Sheapuff's gaze was cold. Why allow such a creature near the nest? It's fine, dismissed Neferpitou. Besides. But Sheapuff disagreed too heavily, and within 1 second, he had already appeared next to them and delivered what would have been a fatal blow. Obviously, since it was a clone, it just popped. Miwa's clone, day 4 evening. Miwa's clone teleported next to Neferpitou, a stack of cards in her hands. I brought the cards this time. Oh goody, said Neferpitou. Miwa wasn't surprised to find Sheapuff was also there. The butterfly ant narrowed his eyes upon seeing Miwa and she felt. A shudder ran through her and she popped. Neferpitou and Sheapuff. What? Neferpitou tilted their head as they curiously regarded Sheapuff. What did you do? I don't understand why you like that creature, Sheapuff reproached Neferpitou. Cats like napping in sunbeams? Neferpitou joked. You are not an actual cat. It's not really an issue, is it? Neferpitou retorted. She's not a threat, just a playmate. You should play with her. She has some fun games. I think not, Sheapuff rejected flatly. One dip into her mind is all I want to tolerate. Oh? Is that why she popped? Now it sounds like you found something there. What did you find? Sheapuff tensed, recalling the sensation of claws digging into his wings. A mere moment inside that mind was a dip into fire. There was a world behind that fire that held something far more dangerous than what Sheapuff cared to admit. He was not afraid of the fox that shared her soul. His fear stemmed from something far deeper. Nothing, he answered shortly. It was a waste of effort. Miwa's clone, day 6, morning. Miwa was relieved Sheapuff stopped trying to kill her when she visited. Instead, the butterfly ant hovered around her and Neferpitou, silently watching them play whatever games they came up with. It took 3 more days until Sheapuff was willing to even converse with Miwa aside from looks of contempt and disgust. It was not out of something he initiated. Miwa had to be the one to talk to him first. Sheapuff, Pitou said I could call her just Pitou, can I just call you Poof? Miwa asked him while playing a hand game with Neferpitou. Do what you want, he said unsparingly. Poof, she agreed to. Do you want to join us? No. Leave the party pooper out of it, said Neferpitou, red eyes gleaming. Sheapuff scoffed. Why do you play with her? You should be preparing for our king. Neferpitou gave him a tired look, then promptly decided to ignore him. They said, Miwa, tell me more about Heaven's Arena. Amen. Okay. Miwa's clone, day 7, morning. So, what's the point of a king? Miwa had been sitting beside Neferpitou atop the nest, the two overlooking the forest. Sheapuff, always cautious of Miwa, hovered nearby and watched them. Miwa had learned through their encounters that the royal guards would abandon the nest when the king was born to directly serve him. She didn't understand the reverence, however, or why the queen even needed a king. To her surprise, it was not Neferpitou who answered her question. Sheapuff let out a loud scoff. The king is a being above all else. It's his destiny to take over this world and rule it, Sheapuff proudly boasted, hazel eyes glistening with plain admiration. Miwa reflected on how much of a pain in the ass setting up Soleil was. She felt sympathy for the king. But why, she asked, her face screwed up in pain at the thought of trying to manage an entire world. She was exhausted from a city. Sheapuff's brow furrowed. What do you mean why? You take over for a means to an end, not an end to a means, said Miwa. Why the need to rule? To show absolute power. You can rule a country and be feared by the rest of the world and have a lot less paperwork, she pointed out. Sheapuff's eyes twitched. He will be the supreme leader. It is his destiny to rule. Again, can rule over a country for the same effect. The world. He should rule the world because only the world will be good enough for him, snapped the butterfly ant. Irk. I wouldn't wish that headache on anyone, said Miwa with plain disdain. You guys haven't even built anything not out of shit, yet you want to take over the entire planet? Neferpitou let out a brief giggle before Sheapuff glared at them. Sheapuff's lips curled back in a sneer. And what would you know about ruling? I mean, I did take over a country, and I am ruling it right now, said Miwa. No way, said Neferpitou, eyes wide. They were incredulous, but filled with delightful curiosity. Sheapuff, on the other hand, looked deeply disturbed. I pity your people. Put. Miwa made an offended noise. Hey. I treat my people fine and dandy. We even have the best crepes in the world. Crepes? I'll bring some, promised Miwa. They're sweet and warm and cold and crunchy and soft. Neferpitou patted her head. Okay. Bring some next time. Miwa, day 8, afternoon. Gon, Killua, and Miwa were enjoying a hearty lunch. Gon and Killua were covered in sweat and exhausted from their training, but the two boys still ate with great gusto. How's your training going? She asked them. Progressing, answered Killua. Yours? Not bad. To tell you the truth. I've also been playing with the chimera ants, Miwa whispered. Gon gasped. What? What are you playing? Mostly hide and seek. Is it fun? So much fun. Miwa beamed. I think I'm becoming friends with at least one of them. You remember the one the one that attacked us that night? Killua's eyes narrowed briefly. Yes. Their name is Neferpitou, Miwa explained happily. They're pretty gosh darn neat. And there's this other one named Sheapuff. He's got really pretty wings. Bit of a butt head though. I'm glad you're having fun, said Gon. It sounds like there might be a chance we don't have to kill the ants, maybe? They're still eating humans. Oh. Gon frowned. That's not good. Baby steps? Baby steps, agreed Gon. Good luck. I hope you win your next game. Me too. Poof's getting annoyingly good at finding me and he's so gosh darn smug about it. Miwa, Day 10 evening. Gon and Killua had progressed far enough into their training that after they trained, Bisky sent them off to challenge one of Morel's disciples. The disciple's name was Knuckle. He was a tall young man with a funny appearance but a soft heart. Gon thought he was earnest, and Killua called him an idiot. Miwa didn't have much a chance to interact him outside of greetings since she was preoccupied with her own training. Even though the three friends were focused on their training, they never missed a meal together. Breakfasts, lunches, dinners, they always made it a point to meet up and share one big meal. It was the perfect way for the three of them to unwind and refresh their minds. Miwa kept sending clones twice a day to the ants, and every other day she'd visit Kite and the others with a new meal from Soleil. Every time they praised her city's food, she beamed in response. Of course, she also visited Kite and the other hunters once a week with food. She didn't want to risk Neferpitou catching her together with them and mistaking Miwa for an enemy, so once a week was all she dared. They were happy for the food, and Miwa was happy to be able to confirm Kite was alive and well so she could reassure Gon. She was relieved they didn't bring up her trying to assassinate the queen again. It seemed like Kurama's assessment of Netero was rather accurate, considering the man had made no grand moves against the nest, despite the fact that more and more humans were slain each day. They instead worked slowly and meticulously to take out the fodder or soldier ants. Miwa refused to believe that the chairman of the Hunter Association was so weak a man he couldn't tackle the nest himself, and therefore she had to conclude he was letting them live, for shits and giggles? Or did he, like Miwa, develop a soft spot for them? Maybe he had his own Kurama? Whatever the reason, something prevented Netero from aggressively pursuing the ants. Nav and Morel Miwa could understand since they were pretty weak. Kite was pro-never taking a life, so he was happy that Miwa was trying to befriend the ants and encouraged her. She kind of wished she could read Netero's mind to confirm. For now, she'd trust Kurama's judgment and continue to reach out to Neferpitou. Things were busy, but it was a good kind of busy. Miwa's clone, Neferpitou, Sheapuf, Day 13 evening. You still haven't really answered my question. I have, you're just incapable of understanding. Neferpitou watched the clone of Miwa and Sheapuf argue back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. It was funny at first, but 3 hours in and neither had let up. Trying to interrupt resulted in being snapped at. Neferpitou didn't really understand the issue in the first place. What was a king? Someone they should serve. Why? Because they were born to. Miwa wasn't satisfied with those answers, and the ants could not comprehend further than that. What if he didn't want to be king? She asked. Of course, he would, he was born to. What if he changes his mind? He couldn't. Why did he need to rule? He was born to. Is that the only thing he can do? Of course not. Then could he not rule? Of course not. And you? Do you have to serve him? Of course, we do. Does he have a name? Don't be absurd, he was the king, he didn't need a name. So many questions. They were arguing in circles. Reasons and motives were difficult to ponder anyway. The ants were born to serve the king, and the king was born to rule. That was all that mattered to them. All that should matter. Neferpitou appreciated Miwa's desire to understand, but they didn't see why she couldn't accept their answers. More? What more could there be? Sheapuf was especially offended by Miwa's questions, even turning red in the face with how furious he'd become during their arguments. He had yet to lose his temper and forced the clone to pop, however, because he was determined for Miwa to comprehend exactly how precious the king was to their existence. Oh well, thought Neferpitou as they enjoyed the crepe. At least Miwa kept bringing by some yummy food. Eating humans was rather dull. Even Sheapuf enjoyed the sweets she brought, although he would lie to her when asked. Of course, if Miwa tried to take the sweet away, he'd just grab back it and give some kind long-winded ramble about why that wasn't necessary. Miwa made a funny face when he did that and called him a tsundere, whatever that was. Miwa's clone, Day 20 evening. Menyuthu Yupi was the final royal guard to be born. He was massive, and looked entirely human except for the bright red skin and insect-like feet. Yupi, thankfully, was unbothered by Miwa's presence after Neferpitou explained. Miwa found that Menyuthu Yupi was a rather simple and straightforward ant. He took things at face value, and did not question further. This delighted Neferpito as much as it aggravated Sheapuf. And so, Menuthu Yupi became a regular in their games. The three loved to play a new version of hide and seek. Neferpito had to constantly keep up and around the nest and forest to monitor for invaders, so when Miwa would hide, Neferpito could find her very easily. However, directing Menuthu Yupi, through the use of her nin marionette, to finding and catching the hidden Miwa was tricky. Menuthu Yupi was clumsy and had no talent for tracking, but he was fast, really fast, and could grow appendages from any part of his body to grab at Miwa. During one of those games, Miwa ended up running into Sheapuf while searching for a hiding spot. She could have gone past him, but she ultimately decided she wanted to greet him. She called out to him, "Poof!" Sheapuf's dark eyes slowly moved to meet the clone's bright gaze. "Yes?" She smiled. "Nothing. I just wanted to see your face." His eyes narrowed. "Why?" "Because it's pretty." He coldly stared at her. "I'm not a flower for you to admire, human." "Ah. Sorry, did I offend you?" she asked. "Offense implies your opinion matters enough for me to care," he bluntly refuted. "Toys do not matter. Humans do not matter. You are merely entertainment for Pito and Yupi." She cocked her head. "But not for you? You do not amuse me. Not even a little bit? Not even an iota. So, you don't like me?" "Naturally." "Ah. What a shame," she sighed. He raised an eyebrow. "'Cause I like you," she told him happily. He destroyed her clone. Miwa. Miwa blinked at the flood of memories coming into her head. "Karama. MN? I think I have a soft spot for tsunderas." Silence. "Karama? I cannot imagine why." "Really? You can't think of a single reason?" "No. HMM. Shut up." Shut up or I'll pump you full of so much energy you won't sleep for a week." Chapter 33, Lammergeier 6. Warning, mentions of pedophilia/adult romantically pursuing a child. It was late into the evening. Miwa rubbed her head at the flood of new memories from her clone popping. She had learned that the royal guards operated mostly separate from the rest of the ants. There was a distinct dissociation between them and the others. At a moment's notice, Neferpito, Sheapuf, and Menuthu Yupi were prepared to sacrifice every ant in that nest for their goals. There was an inherent lack of empathy from them, despite them being the same specifies. Narcissism? Or something deeper? Miwa couldn't tell. While they were aloof with the ants ranked below them, they were on good terms with one another. They never argued. Even if Sheapuf disliked Miwa and told Neferpito to stop playing with her, he didn't put up much of a fuss. He didn't berate Neferpito, or try to convince the cat ant otherwise. He expressed an opinion, listened to Neferpito's response, and left it at that. Neferpito, Miwa had learned, was the most sensitive between the three. Whimsical and playful, they were acutely aware of their own actions and how it affected Miwa. They would say or do different things to coax certain reactions out of Miwa. Most importantly, when Miwa had one bad day and didn't really want to play but didn't want to not send out a clone in case they felt ignored, Neferpito offered to listen to Miwa instead. They listened as Miwa ranted about how frustrating it was to deal with paperwork, and further probed about how it made Miwa feel. It was a moment of kindness Miwa hadn't expected. Sheapuf was more difficult to deal with. He was stubborn. From their first meeting he had decided Miwa was only a troublesome toy, and changing that viewpoint was like dragging nails across a chalkboard. He would never initiate conversations with her, and would sometimes flat out ignore her. The only time Miwa could get him into a prolonged conversation was if she, unintentionally, provoked an argument. He was passionate about his future king, which made it easy to accidentally trigger him. She tried to be nice to him. She was fortunate that she was already accustomed to one temperamental nine-tailed fox, otherwise she might have actually been hurt by the slew of venom Sheapuf would snap at her if she aggravated him too much. Still, she had very small moments of catching him off guard. Bringing him sweets or books elicited a haughty thank you, and sometimes, just sometimes, she got a teeny tiny smile when he thought she wasn't looking. Perhaps not impossible to be friends with, but golly gosh, she had work cut out for herself. Menuthu Yupi, blessedly, was the simplest. He was honest, honorable, and straightforward. He listened to whatever Miwa wanted to say, and if he liked it, he told her. If he didn't, he admitted that, too. If something confused him, he asked her to explain. He liked to play games, and he liked to listen to stories about battles and heroes going on quests. Miwa was becoming quite an excellent storyteller because of how often he requested them. Miwa would be hesitant to say she had a friendship with them. She knew, and they knew, when their king was born, if he ordered Miwa's head, they'd do their gosh darn best to bring it to him on a silver platter. Miwa was something to them. Entertainment? Acquaintance? A bit more than a simple toy for at least two of them, but anything more than that. She thought she saw potential, however, and that was what kept her going. She hoped her instincts were right and there was a chance for a genuine friendship. Even if they weren't fond of her, she was starting to get fond of them. She'd really hate to have to fight them. You really are too soft. Am I? She'd like to be soft. But then she remembered how many people she killed with her bare hands, the sensation of their warm blood and the squelch of their organs popping under her pressure. I wish I was all soft. That'd be too boring. You're fine as you are. She smiled to herself. Kurama's description of Netero, Miwa had found, felt increasingly accurate. Miwa could not think of any rational or logical reason for the hunter chairman to be so passive about the ants. The group worked on taking out unimportant soldiers instead of charging the nest like they really ought to do. If Netero truly felt he could not handle the nest on his own, he should be more than capable of calling in the appropriate reinforcements. Yet the man refrained. It was starting to feel like the man wanted the king to be born. Like he wanted his enemies to grow as powerful as can be before he stepped in. Miwa wasn't complaining, but she was perturbed. She didn't understand his reasoning at all. She even wondered if maybe, what if he wanted to fight her? What if he was humoring her, setting her up for something else? She couldn't point out any one thing that made her feel that. Netero was only ever polite to her and encouraged her relationships with the ants. Yet, her gut told her there was something more at work. Because of Gon and Killua's training, the three of them had moved in to stay at Palm's room instead. She had checked out a suite, so there were a couple bedrooms in addition to a living room and kitchen. Bisky and Miwa were situated in the living room, both reading. Bisky seemed engrossed in reading magazines with pictures of pretty boys, and Miwa focused on trying to read the books Krallo got her. They were hard to understand. They used a lot of big words that she didn't know and had to ask whoever was nearby, most often Bisky, but she was determined. The front door to the room swung open as Killua entered with Gon on his back. Miwa could smell the blood and sweat, and looking up, she noticed how battered he was. "Oh wow," she said. After Gon and Killua trained in practicing their nen, they had to start fighting one of Morel's disciples. So far Gon had been the only one to repeatedly challenge Knuckle, Morel's disciple, and Killua would carry Gon back to the room to rest. Miwa had to admit it was rather strange that Killua had yet to fight anyone for the entire month. Was he waiting for the other disciple? Or playing it cool and wanting to keep his abilities hidden for as long as possible? He never answered when she or Gon asked, and eventually they stopped asking him. Bisky clicked her tongue upon seeing Gon's state. She summoned her nen ability, a personification of a masseuse that could heal with massages, while Killua headed into the one of bedrooms that the three children shared. Bisky followed behind him. Miwa's ears twitched as she heard Bisky sharply address Killua, "Killua. Fight me." Miwa heard a strangled cry of dismay and surprise from Killua followed by a harsh whap. "Why do I know so many violent sundaras?" Miwa wondered, mentally adding Bisky to the category. Killua leapt out of the bedroom and into the living room with. "What? Oh wow." Bisky, who was once a dainty cute little girl, had transformed into an extremely muscular woman. She was tall, had bulging biceps, and her face drastically changed from soft to sharp. It was such a huge transformation that if Miwa couldn't smell her and feel her core, she would have thought it was someone else entirely. Bisky must have been using a type of henge to change her appearance. Miwa couldn't blame her. Miwa used henge to give herself fox tails and ears sometimes, after all. She loved fluffy and cute things. Bisky loved pink and cute things. Miwa felt a sense of camaraderie between Bisky and herself. They were buddies in their love of cuteness, and willingness to transform themselves to fit that cuteness. "Miwa," Bisky said, "would you mind giving us some space to train?" "Okie dokie," Miwa said, teleporting away. Killua. It was a painfully one-sided training session. He used the word training lightly, as it felt more akin to a lynching. His limbs were already aching from trying to dodge her in that living room, and a cut from his cheek slowly oozed blood. She hadn't even directly touched him, the wind behind her punch was that sharp. Bisky coolly assessed Killua. Now, do you know your weakness? You're too quick to give up. You're too cautious about fighting. Some might say you underestimate yourself. When facing an enemy you believe to be stronger, you fight on the premise of escaping. Killua glared, wanting to respond, yet he could not. He was instantly reminded of that sensation. That ant had been unlike anything he had encountered. Its aura was massive in scope. Not as large as Miwa's, but seeped in a kind of cold, cruel malice. It wasn't human. It was a monster through and through. The instant Killua had felt that aura, he knew they were up against an opponent they had no right to be facing. Everything after that was pure instinct. Bisky continued, softening her voice, I realize that this isn't your fault. It's the fault of whoever taught you to fight. Illumi's image flashed through his head, coupled with phantom aches and pains from his childhood training. Habits that are burned into your body and soul aren't easy to break. But I can say one thing for sure. Bisky folded her arms across her chest. Somewhere down the line, you'll leave Gon and Miwa to die. His heart stopped. Cold, raw terror slammed into him. He wanted to immediately refute it, wanted to deny it with every fiber of his being. But could he? Fear clawed inside his stomach, coupled with freezing rage. He did not mean for his expression to darken into that of murderous anger, but he could not help himself. He loathed what she had told him, and he hated his inability to instantly reject it. He wanted to open his mouth and tell her how wrong she was, but he couldn't stop remembering his training. Bisky said, combat ability can change depending on environment and physical condition. Even those who are initially considered weak could achieve victory over the strong in the right circumstances. But in your case, you're constantly assuming the enemy is always at their best. You assume the worst-case scenario. Even when facing enemies with equal strength, you worry about how strong they are or what they might do to you. If we're talking about a stronger enemy, there's no question. You don't bother to think about how you could win. Running is your only option. That's how losers think. Killua felt a spike of murderous desire in his heart as he glared at her. Suppressing that bad habit and forcing yourself to face enemies stronger than you will take determination. If you cannot defeat Shoot tomorrow, you must leave them. His world tilted. Miwa. Good luck, she cheered as Killua and Gon left to face Knuckle and Shoot. Won't need it. We're gonna kick some ass, chirped Gon. He held up his hand and Miwa instantly high-fived him. Amen. Be back later, said Killua. I'll wait for you, she said with a bright smile. They did not win. When Killua and Gon hadn't returned after an hour, Miwa went to check on them, only to find the two boys sulking in the park. Yeesh, said Miwa, consoling Gon with head pats. She was on a park bench with Gon on the grass in front of her and resting his head on her left knee. Poor you. Poor me, sniffled Gon. More head pats. All the head pats, she assured him, continuing with her head pats. Killua, come here and I'll also pat your head. I don't. Killua, they whined. Killua sighed, took a seat on the grass and placed his head on Miwa's other knee. She patted him as well. The three stayed out there for the rest of the night. Gon was in a pouty mood and didn't want to get up. It had been a while since the three had camped outside, and it was such a lovely night that they decided to stay out there. In the morning, they went back to the inn. Miwa hadn't interacted with Palm very much. The older woman stayed in the kitchen or hid in the shadows and silently watched them. Sometimes she'd ramble about something that didn't make a lot of sense to Miwa. She knew Palm was Nod's disciple, and that it was up to Gon and Killua defeating Morel's disciple that would allow Palm to join them on their hunt in the NGL. She had high expectations of Gon and Killua, even making Gon pinky promise to defeat Knuckle. Miwa hadn't realized exactly how perturbed the woman was until the three of them returned from their defeat. Palm was waiting for them in the darkened living room, clutching a trembling, ragged kitchen knife. Her voice came out low as soon as Gon opened the door. You must take responsibility. She stood up slowly, walking toward them. You promised to take me to NGL. You said you'd swallow 1,000 needles if you broke that promise. She doesn't mean to literally. Miwa took a reflexive step forward, popping her knuckles. To her surprise, Gon moved to stand in front of her. He said, I'm sorry. I don't want an apology, rasped Palm. But there's no point in having you swallow 1,000 needles. So what can I do to make up for it? Let's see. Palm held up one finger. You must do one thing I say. Killua's eyes narrowed. Don't you think that's a little unnecessary? Okay, Gon agreed. Go out with me, she said. Killua's face morphed into that of pure disgust, while Gon's eyes widened in surprise. Go out with me, she said again, pointing the kitchen knife at Gon. Even though Miwa knew Gon could probably kick Palms, but she disliked that the woman was pointing a knife at her friend. She made no immediate move to react, as Gon had plainly stood in front of Miwa for the purpose of non-verbally telling Miwa to stand down. Miwa bit her bottom lip to keep from saying anything too harsh, and she squeezed her hands tightly into fists. How old is she? I dunno. She is an adult while Gon is a child, correct? Miwa felt an echo of unease from Kurama. Miwa, if any adult ever asks you out on a date, no matter who, let me take over. How come? Is that bad? Miwa tried to think back on what little she knew about dating, but her memories came up in vague flashes and blank spots. She hadn't been on a date before, and, as she understood it, hadn't really cared about dating. She remembered some of her old friends dated each other and she couldn't remember anything more than that. Kurama was silent, but Miwa could feel echoes of disdain rolling off her friend. Is Gon in danger? Do I need to kill her? She hadn't considered Palm a danger before. She was weaker than anyone they had faced, and so Miwa knew Gon and Killua could handle her in a fight. The woman rarely even talked to any of them, preferring to watch them in the shadows of the kitchen. Although Gon had made it a point to block Miwa from attacking Palm, if Kurama told her that Palm was a threat to Gon, Miwa would go straight for the throat. At the moment, the woman was only shakily holding a knife, which Miwa thought was very rude, at Gon and had asked him on a date. Somehow, one of those two facts made Kurama uncomfortable. Why? Okay, Gon agreed. Killua's head whipped around as he stared at Gon in disbelief. Do you have any idea what you're doing? Yeah, but I did say I'd do anything, Gon retorted. Killua glared at Palm. And you have no problem playing dirty like this? That's none of your business, Palm snapped. It's our problem. It's up to the two of us. Don't interrupt us. Her voice turned shrill. This is something the two of us must decide alone. Just be quiet. We're going out now. There's somewhere I really want to go. Gon held up a hand. Oh, sorry. I can't go out today. Today, I have to train with Killua and Miwa. I know. You can train with us, Palm. What are you talking about? Didn't you say we'd go out? Then, why are they tagging along? She snarled. And why would we train? This is a date. Our first date. The first date for us. The first date. But it isn't a date. We can have a proper date late, since it's our first date like you said, explained Gon. Wow. What's wow? How would you react if it was Hisoka asking Gon? Hisoka's head would be on the ground. And why? Because he feels icky and sticky and gross. His gaze doesn't feel right when he looks at us. This lady may not be invested like Hisoka, but I don't understand? It's, oh well. Miwa could feel Kurama flattening his ears, a clear sign he was flustered. Why don't you ask one of the other adults? It might be the norm here, maybe. I hope not. Gon continued without missing a beat. I need time to prepare for it, too. Prepare? Prepare for what? That's. Gon smiled brightly, adding a note of teasing joy in his voice as he said, a secret. You get to find out tomorrow. Oh. In that case. Palm dropped her knife. Okay. Really, if you'd explained first, I wouldn't have been so angry. Sorry. But I wanted to keep it a secret to surprise you. Palm covered her mouth with one of her hands, the picture-perfect scene of a bashful maiden. If that bashful maiden looked like she belonged in a horror movie as one of the ghosts haunting the heroes. You wanted to surprise me? Gosh. Let's meet tomorrow at 10 in the morning in front of the bulletin board. I'll be there. Wow. Please explain? You're amazing, Gon, said Killua. The three of them had gone to a place called a gym to train. After training in Nin and sparring for so long, Miwa figured the boys wanted to do something more mindless. They chose to lift weights there. Miwa was relieved the gym had excellent ventilation, so it didn't stink at all. She was worried when they described the place to her that it'd reek like heaven's arena bottom floors. What do you mean? Gon cocked his head as he did bicep curls. Well, listening to you talk to Palm, you seemed used to this stuff, explained Killua. Really? Killua frowned thoughtfully. I was wondering. Have you been on a date before? Asked Killua. Sure, I have, answered Gon. Although most of them were with Mito. Killua paused in his reps. Oh, that makes sense. Wait, who else was there? Gon smiled. Oh, some of the fishing boats that stopped at Whale Island were full of women, some of whom only liked younger men. Kurama felt increasingly disturbed, his unease rolling off Miwa in waves of unsettled anxiety. Kurama? So, I took them around the village and had them teach me things, Gon went on. Women like that were called fanatics. Please don't be the norm here. Please don't be the norm here. Please don't be the norm here. Miwa was alarmed by Kurama's mantra and anxiety. Kurama? Have you been on a date, Killua? Don't be stupid. I was an assassin for most of my life, I didn't have time for that. When I quit, I've only been with you and Miwa, snapped Killua. True. What about you, Miwa? Miwa shook her head. But it sounds like something fun, so I'd like to. No. What? Then why not go on one with Killua tomorrow? Asked Gon. It took a moment to process what Gon had said because Kurama was apparently having a bit of a meltdown. No. 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 This is not okay. Miwa frowned, wincing at how loud Kurama had gotten. I can't think right now. I have a headache, I'm going to go lay down. Boo. Very much boo. Greater than over equal to less than over equal to asterisk. Kurama encouraged Miwa to send out a quick text. He wanted confirmation on something fast. To Krallo, Phaeton, Nobunaga, Shalnirk. Formed group message with Krallo, Phaeton, Nobunaga, Shalnirk. Message, Miwa, hi. Quick question. Message, Miwa, is it normal for an adult to date a child? Message, Shalnirk, lol, is that a joke? Message, Shalnirk, you like Phaeton but you can do so much better. Message, Miwa, degree. Message, Miwa. Message, Miwa. Message, Miwa, N. Message, Miwa, no. Message, Miwa, different adult asked. Message, Shalnirk, hahaha, that's a dead adult. Message, Nobunaga, an adult asked you out? Message, Phaeton, name? Message, Shalnirk, lol. Message, Shalnirk, someone get the coroner righty lol. Message, Krallo, come here. Message, Miwa, I. Message, Krallo, now. Yua, they seem angry, Miwa thought uneasy. That's a relief. Why? With great trepidation, Miwa teleported to Krallo. The phantom troop leader was in Soleil, dozens of explosive tags drawn around him. He had apparently been in the middle of creating even more tags. He and Phaeton were using Miwa's office. Krallo did not look up as he carefully drew the few Injutsu seals. Explain. Miwa took a deep breath and retold the day's events. Phaeton clicked his tongue. Is that all? Yes? In answering to your question then, no, said Krallo. Age of consent in most countries is 16, and romantic relationships between those under the age of consent and those over it are illegal. Krallo paused in his brush stroke. Being a hunter, however, instantly boosts anyone over the age of consent, regardless of how physically old they are. Similar to an ANBU status, then. Being illegal didn't really explain why it bothered Kurama so much. He didn't care about laws. He felt her confusion, and shifted uncomfortably. You didn't after you lost after that incident, education in this area was lacking for you, he hesitantly started to explain. There's a reason why you feel uncomfortable around that clown, besides being a masochist? Masochism is a little bit more than More than what? Being weirdly happy to get beaten up? Yes. For a brief moment, Miwa was reminded of another memory. She sat in front of the man with long, spiky white hair. He was writing in his notebook, sitting atop a man he had beaten to a state of unconscious. Miwa had been fighting the man previously. She wasn't supposed to kill him, he was a bounty to be brought back, but suddenly her mentor had intervened. "Why did you do that?" she asked in confusion. "Fucking masochists," he grumbled. "Never, ever, fight them." "What's that?" "Weirdos who like to get beaten up by cute little girls. They're sick. Keep away from them." "I don't understand." "You don't need to. You're too young anyway. Just promise to stay away from them." The memory tingled in Miwa's head. It was one of her earlier memories. What? What more could there be? "HRRRRRRRRK. Sit," said Krallo. Miwa promptly sat on the floor. "You are confused," he observed. "Extremely," she said. "Ask and I'll answer," he said. "As best I can. I'm leaving," Phaeton muttered before he promptly left the room. The following morning, Miwa laid in bed as Gon and Killua cuddled with her. She stared up at the ceiling, her mind mulling over the unexpected lessons she had been given yesterday. She knew, intellectually, how the reproductive system worked. But she didn't really think about it. She didn't even think about the steps leading up to courtship. She knew people dated, but she didn't really think, how? Why? The steps. Her face felt hot as she remembered how blasé Krallo was. He certainly answered every single question that popped up in Miwa's head, and he did so without batting an eye or appearing bothered. He was a textbook, reciting every answer in a monotone voice as he meticulously continued to craft explosive tags. Even when Miwa's ears burned and she stumbled over her words, the Phantom Troop leader was entirely unaffected. Her heart thumped loudly in her chest, her stomach somersaulting as the information churned in her mind. She had been so unnerved by the abundance of information she hadn't even sent out clones to the ants that night, or in the morning. She was still processing. It was hard to digest. It made her feel a very weird combination of nervousness and excitement. Especially when she thought about. Relationships are weird. Yes. She patted Killua and Gon, who were sleeping so cutely beside her. If she were to date. Her face felt hotter by the second. Butterflies swarmed inside her, making her feel simultaneously queasy and light. Miwa had never been the nervous type before, but lo and behold, she certainly felt nervous that morning, maybe even a little scared. Killua was the first to wake up. He opened his eyes, then sat up, rubbing at them. "Good morning," he mumbled, not yet looking at her. "Good morning," she weakly returned. Their soft voices woke up Gon, who let out a small grumble and curled further into Miwa's side. He body hugged her while Killua got out of bed. Miwa was acutely aware of how warm Gon felt cuddling with her. "Gon, you better wake up otherwise you'll be late," warned Killua when he noticed the time. "Meh." Gon sighed, sitting up. He noticed Miwa's complexion and said, "You seem a little sick, are you okay?" Miwa wished her face would stop feeling so dang hot. "I'm fine, I just, kinda had my mind blown yesterday." Gon nodded. "Sometimes I feel like steam comes out of my ears when I get bombarded with a lot of information." "Did you learn something new?" "I think it'd be more accurate to say I just didn't think too hard about certain things, and now I am. Like why the sky is blue, how babies are made." Killua did a double take. "You didn't know?" "I had a general idea," she retorted quickly, her ears burning. "Like I know biology. I just didn't think about it?" "Why is the sky blue anyway?" "It's a reflection of the ocean," answered Killua. "That's neat," said Gon. "Welp. I'm off to go on my date." Gon and Miwa sat up suddenly. "Yeah?" Miwa leaned forward and sniffed Gon's neck to commit how he smelled that morning to memory. "If I smell palm anywhere, she shouldn't be, I will kill her." Gon patted Miwa's head. "Oh. Okay, bye-bye." "Bye-bye," she said. As Gon headed out of the bed to get ready, Miwa started to massage her cheeks in hopes her face wouldn't feel so unreasonably warm. "That's it. I'm just not gonna think about it anymore. Whatever happens, happens. You're going to be passive?" "Thinking about it makes me feel, it's distracting." I have better things to do. Like playing with ants. For the briefest moments, she thought she heard Kurama rumble in a way reminiscent of a purr. When Gon left, Killua threw a hat on and looked over at Miwa, who was still struggling with her blush. Killua approached her, leaning down to press his forehead against hers. Oh no! Miwa squeaked, her body burning up. Her head felt like it was starting to spin as her heart thumped painfully loud in her chest. It was one thing to cuddle into her side, but having a face so up close to her own made her think of. Maybe you are sick, said Killua, a note of concern in his voice. Rest up, okay? I'll bring back some rice porridge. HRRRK, she squawked. I'm going to take a spade. She teleported to the ocean, sprinted into the cold water, and effectively fled from those warm fuzzy feelings Killua and Gon made her feel. SNRRRK, hee hee hee. I'm back. Miwa chirped, teleporting to Killua and Gon. The spade had drastically helped calm her down. Once she was relaxed enough, she indulged in some training. She became so absorbed in her tasks, she hadn't even realized it had grown dark outside. She figured Gon would be done with his date by that point, so she decided to teleport to him. Dinner. Gon and Killua were eating dinner at a small restaurant. It looked like they had ordered appetizers. Here, said Gon, holding up a piece of chip with dip on it. Miwa took a bite out of it. Nummy? Nummy, she agreed. Take a seat, said Killua, patting the chair between them. We ordered food for you. Although you didn't answer your phone earlier. Oh. I must have left it back in the room, I'm sorry. Miwa scratched her cheek. Gon, how was your date? Meh, he said as Miwa leaned over to sniff him. Don't worry, nothing happened. Miwa glanced over at Killua, who was covered in scratches. Killua, why are you scratched up? Training got out of hand, he said vaguely, resting his chin on his palm. Gon scooted over a drink with a bendy straw to Miwa. She took a big gulp out of it, savoring its bubbly texture and sweet taste. Killua coolly assessed her. You still want to do that date thing? Miwa choked on her drink as her face grew hot. In a weak squeaky voice, she kind of sorta maybe whimpered in fear, Then do why Killua's face turned red. Never mind. Miwa glanced away, fanning at her face to cool it back down. Okay? Gon glanced at Miwa, then at Killua. He had a look of pity in his eyes when he stared at them. Killua noticed and promptly pinched his cheeks. Shut up. Ow, ow, ow. I didn't say anything. You wanted to. Well, now that you meant OW, Killua please. Chapter 34, Lammergeier 7. The following day the three friends were at a gym, lifting weights. Not that I don't like training at the gym, said Miwa, but how come you both stopped training with your nan? 'Cause mine got sealed, said Gon. Oh, did I forget to tell you? Yes, she said. What happened? Knuckles' technique. It'll be sealed for 30 days. A whole month of known training? Yeah, he sighed. Then. Miwa tilted her head. Could I see if I can purge it? Both boys looked at her in surprise. Yes, immediately said Gon. You didn't even ask for an expla. Yes, he said again. Purge me now. Miwa smiled in amusement. Miwa bit on her thumb, separating her physical energy from her spiritual energy to create none. She channeled her nin through her arm, hand, and finally thumb until it coagulated atop the blood. The blood dripped upwards, defying gravity. It disappeared into the air, morphing into a shimmering golden white butterfly. 3 drops of blood for butterflies. They fluttered about, slowly and gracefully moving to land on Gon's shoulder. As soon as they touched Gon's shoulder, a mischievously adorable purple cat appeared on his shoulder. It would appear that the cat was the cause for suppressing Gon's nen. The butterflies moved to sit atop the cat, absorbing its energy into them. There was the sound of a sigh as the cat completely disappeared along with the butterflies. At once, Gon let out his nun. Wow! All fixed up, thanks, Miwa. Miwa's clone. The next time Miwa visited the ants, she was surprised that they were no longer at the nest. Rather, Miwa found they were somewhere in the forest. Miwa barely had time to process that fact until she noticed a 4th ant with them. He was green, average built, and had a thick striped tail with a pointer at the end. His purple eyes coldly assessed Miwa. He didn't have a strong smell, and whatever Miwa did smell from him, she couldn't identify. Even his nin core was ambiguous. Blank, almost. "Who is this?" the new ant coldly asked. "A toy," said Neferpitou. "An annoyance, my king," said Sheapuf. "King? Friend," said Miwa, wondering if she ought to curtsy. "You are not human," observed the king. "Oh? You can tell right away," the clone exclaimed. "Wow, you've got really good intuition." "I'm a clone. When you kill me, I go poof." He promptly severed her head, so poof she went. Miwa. Miwa blinked at the new memory, pausing mid-bite in her slice of pizza. She, Killua, and Gon were eating out at a pizza shop Gon found by chance. A king, huh? More like a baby. With the king now being born, Miwa had to wonder how the royal ants would change. Or would they at all? Shame he doesn't have a name. Sheapuf was adamant that a king did not need a name because he was only ever meant to be the one king. So, what is he outside of being a king? An infant? Miwa ignored Kurama's sass. Outside of being a king, Miwa didn't know what his purpose was. She was never given an answer on that. The royal guards certainly didn't know, at least. Maybe now that he was there, she'd find out. Does he even know? Don's phone started to ring. He scarfed down his last slice of pizza, licked his fingers clean, then answered it. "Why? Finish eating before you answer," Killua sighed. Don swallowed. "Hello?" Miwa's ears twitched when she recognized the voice on the other end. Kite said, "Hello, Gon. I wanted to give you guys an update on the Chimera ant situation." Killua must have also heard Kite's voice over the phone, because he frowned and turned his chair to face Gon. Miwa took that opportunity to swipe his last pepperoni slice. He swatted the back of her hand, glaring at her. When she tried again, he grabbed her hand. "Oh? What's going on?" asked Gon, watching as Miwa tried to use her other hand to grab the slice. Killua grabbed that hand, too. The king had been born. He killed the queen along with some other ants. "The royal guards defected," said Kite. Miwa went for the Hail Mary and dove to grab the slice with her mouth. Killua shamelessly headbutted her. "Eighth," said Gon, giving his friends a tired look. "It looks like the remaining ants are going to scatter to try and build their own nests," said Kite, "so we'll be pulling back to Rias's and hunt them down." "So, when are we meeting up?" asked Gon, grabbing Killua's slice while he was struggling to keep Miwa at bay and eating it himself. Killua and Miwa gasped at Gon's betrayal. "I appreciate the two of you wanting to come help," said Kite over the phone. "But you recently lost to Knuckles and Shoot." "We can still help." Kite was silent for a minute. "1 month," he said. "Then I'll come test you myself. If you fail my test, you have to stay put until the Chimera ants are entirely dealt with, no complaints." "Deal," exclaimed Gon excitedly, hanging up. "Go get us more pizza, you thief," ordered Killua. Okay, giggled Gon. The three ordered a couple more pizzas, and once everything had been devoured, they leaned back in their seats and relaxed. "Miwa," said Gon. "Let's train in chakra for this month." Miwa smiled. "Okay." Before going to sleep that night, Miwa teleported to Kite, surprised to find that the other hunters weren't with him anymore. He was running through a forest, so Miwa had to start running to keep up with him. "Are we still in the NGL?" Miwa wondered. "You are still in contact with the royal guards?" asked Kite as soon as he noticed her. "Yeah," she said. "Do you still feel there's a chance for peace?" Miwa smiled. "I sure hope so." Kite glanced away. It doesn't hurt to tackle a problem from multiple angles. At this point, however, the ants have killed a lot of people. Even if they do agree to peace, would they be allowed it? Miwa frowned. "Something to consider," he advised her. "A life taken cannot be undone." "Yes, thank you, he returned with a kind smile. "How are the boys? Eager to train?" Do you need a lift? I would be grateful for one." "Thank you." Miwa's clone. The next time Miwa showed up, they were in some type of palace. She had appeared in a room with only the king and Neferpitou. Miwa looked around, staring at all the marble and architecture. It sure was a fancy place. Fanciest place Miwa had ever seen. She wanted to steal everything inside it. Maybe later, she thought. She didn't think it would help her friendship with the ants if she stole stuff from their new home. Toy, the king coolly greeted her. I'd prefer Miwa, she said. The king's eyes narrowed. You are bold. Because you cannot die? Miwa smiled. Maybe? Then what games do you play? The king coldly asked. Hide and seek? Miwa cocked her head. I can do whack-a-mole with my clones. Whack-a-mole? I make a bunch of clones and you try to kill them before the time's out, said Miwa brightly. You can't destroy the environment, though, otherwise you lose. I see, said the king. Then let's play. How many? How many can you make? I could literally make us drown in clones, she giggled. Pito's record is 100 clones in an hour, but we were using the entire forest. Then 1,000 clones, ordered the king. Roger. He popped them all within 15 minutes. On the third day of Miwa's clone showing up to play, the king had decided Miwa's games weren't intellectually stimulating enough. She might have been offended, but he was absolutely right. Miwa would be the first to admit she wasn't clever when it came to strategy or long-term plans. The next day Miwa showed up, she found that the king was playing with a human. The human was shaky, sweaty, and judging from the smell had likely peed themselves in sheer terror. Despite how distressed the human was, none of the ants seemed to care. Smells horrible, thought the clone. What's the king doing? Asked Miwa, staring curiously at the game. The king lounged on a cushion with a board in front of him and the trembling human on the other side of the board. Sheapuff and Neferpito were leaning against a wall to the left of the king. Neferpito's tail twitched when Miwa showed up, the cat ant flicking their ears to acknowledge the clone's presence. Sheapuff, however, did not even spare her a glance. Playing, said Neferpito. Ah, I wish I could play. It's called chess, said Sheapuff. Get out or be silent. Miwa mimed zipping her lips shut while Neferpito rolled their eyes and left the room. Sheapuff pushed off against the wall and took a seat on a small stool. Miwa sat on the floor beside him, silently watching the game played. 10 no, 15? Minutes passed, and the human whimpered something about forfeiting. Return to your room, intoned the king dismissively. The human cried in relief, scrambling to run out of the room. There was a long moment of silence until the king turned his head to look at Miwa. Can you play this? Asked the king. I'm definitely not smart enough to put up a challenge, she said with a shake of her head. Pity. But, she said, I'm told I'm a good storyteller. The king cocked his head. Tell me a story. Miwa smiled. Okay. Once upon a time there was a lonely little bird. Miwa. Another week ticked by. Killua and Gon studied chakra in between their standard training routine. Both boys were excited to learn ninjutsu. Killua wasn't surprised to find that he had a rayon, lightning, affinity, but Gon was delighted to find out he had a katan, fire, 1. Ninjutsu would provide both boys with a long-range attack, something they sorely lacked. The hand seals were awkward at first, but until they learned how to manipulate their chakra without the seals, they'd have to suck it up. Miwa found both boys to be quick studies. She was hesitant to use prodigies, but she found no other explanation. They had an intuitive grasp of how to manipulate the energy inside them, and within the 2 days of practicing ninjutsu, they were able to perform C ranks without fuss. In terms of core size, Miwa placed them at Chunin level, which meant they were okay to pop out several C ranks and a couple of B ranks until they were exhausted. They did not have a chakra network, so Miwa wasn't sure if they could expand their base power by repetitive use. Their core felt bigger compared to when they began their nin training, but Miwa wasn't absolutely certain. She'd have to monitor them over the course of months. If they were able to make their cores large enough to throw out several A ranks without becoming exhausted, then Miwa would teach them the base Rasengan. After all, they were family. Her family. Miwa's clone. Naya. Neferpito groaned in frustration. I hate not being able to leave my post. Guarding is so boring. Neferpito leaned back, flailing their arms reminiscent of a child throwing a tantrum. I wanna play. I wanna fight. What do you wanna play? Asked Miwa. Anything, they said. I brought cards? Nia, something more active. Tag? Yes. Neferpito hopped up. Can't leave the palace, however. Okay, agreed Miwa. Gimme 3-second head start. 1, 2. Time spent at the palace was surprisingly lackluster. Her clone would appear and either entertain the king or entertain the guards. Neferpito was forever stuck on guard duty thanks to their excellent nin use, and welcomed any distraction. Neferpito, Menthuthupi, and Miwa always enjoyed themselves when they were able to. It was actually starting to feel like Miwa was becoming friends with them. Neferpito would pat her head, and Menthuthupi even smiled at her from time to time. Sheapuf was harder to read. If Miwa wanted to spend time with him, it had to be done with the king since the butterfly ant rarely left the king's side. Most of the time, Miwa would sit beside Sheapuf and watch the king play a new board game against some poor shivering human that rank of nasty sweat, body odor, and fear. A couple of them had even lost their bowel movements, they were so terrified of the king. Miwa didn't understand. The king wasn't oozing malice and didn't really seek to kill them. The king only wanted to be entertained. A shame Miwa wasn't smart enough to offer that kind of entertainment. Not to say they couldn't have any fun. The king seemed to enjoy when Miwa accidentally antagonized Sheapuf by arguing with the butterfly ant. In fact, Miwa thought she saw the barest hint of a smile when she made Sheapuf so frustrated with her, he turned red in the face. It was made funnier to the king because Miwa was actively trying not to upset Sheapuf. She wanted to be his friend, but gosh darn it, he was just so dang stubborn about the stupidest things. She found it nearly impossible to see eye with him because they kept disagreeing on fundamental philosophies. He argued with her over food, over music, over books. He spoiled the ending of one of the books she was reading out of spite, too. Oh, Miwa was so angry she tried to strangle him but got popped in the process. He likes arguing with you, Kurama had told her. Why? She didn't understand it at all, and she was extremely upset with him for a whole day afterward. Why, when she brought crepes for them to enjoy, she even purposefully took a bite of his so he'd have one less bite to enjoy. What a jerk. Miwa's clone appeared next to Sheapuf one rainy afternoon. She was surprised to find a young woman now playing with the king. Even more surprised that she didn't stink of fear, or even looked perturbed about the situation. Miwa sat down next to Sheapuf, the butterfly ant barely sparing her a glance as he continued to read from a book. Ever since Sheapuf spitefully spoiled the ending of one of Miwa's books, he had taken to covering all the books he was reading with a black cover so Miwa couldn't see the title and spoil it in return. Clever bastard. Miwa glared hard at the book, leaning on her knees to try and read it. Oh, that's so not fair, she thought, realizing that he was reading it in another language. Miwa barely learned the common language. He smirked at her when he noticed her dirty look. Sticking her nose up in the air, Miwa hopped up from her seat and left. She was just going to get more upset if she stuck around. Pito! Miwa called out, running through the palace halls in search of the pretty kitty. Up here, they called out in response as Miwa caught their scent. Meow, what do you want to do today? Strangle Poof. Neferpito giggled. They beckoned Miwa over. Come here. Miwa hurried over to their side, and to her utter delight, Neferpito patted her head. There, said Neferpito. Miwa beamed. Poor me? Poor you. There. He. Chapter 35, Lammergeier 8. Gon and Killua trained with Miwa for 30 days. They exclusively studied how to utilize chakra, both boys able to spar atop water, and use small ninjutsus in their chosen element. They weren't able to effectively use ninjutsu during battle, but Miwa knew it was only a matter of time. At the end of those 30 days, Kite came to test the boys on whether they were ready to help fight the Chimera ants. Miwa didn't care to watch, so she opted to check up on her city while they did that. She got to take Kaluto out for lunch since he was staying in the city with Shellnurk and Nobunaga helping plan out a heist. By the time she returned 3 hours later, her friends were tired but pretty dang happy. Gon and Killua had passed Kite's test. We're going to the Republic of East Gorto, said Kite. The ants are planning something there. We'll take the train and meet with others. Okie dokie, said Gon. Train leaves in an hour, take care of any unfinished business you have here. Will do, said Killua. We'll see you at the station, Miwa promised. As the three children packed up their belongings at the hotel they were staying at, Miwa decided to brave a question. Miwa mumbled softly, Do you two think the ants should be exterminated? Killua shrugged, storing his clothes in the storage scroll he had created with Miwa's guidance. A line has to be drawn somewhere. Gon nodded. I mean, it was fun fighting them, but it'd kinda suck if humanity was wiped out. Miwa fiddled with her fingers. And if they just stayed in their country? Or, stopped? Gon and Killua exchanged a look. Killua asked, Miwa, what do you really want? I want to see if maybe we can find a peaceful solution. When we go on this excursion, could you too, would it be, Miwa rubbed her face. I know they've, killed a lot of humans, but so did, Miwa, do you want to try to make nice with the human-eating ants? Gon asked nicely. Miwa nodded sheepishly. Okay. We can try to make nice with the human-eating ants. You're both insane. They're human-eating giant ants, Killua reminded them. And, said Gon, if I remember right, Kurama is human-eating giant fox demon? Oh, said Killua while Miwa nodded again. Killua sighed. Fine. I might let some of them live. Thanks guys. They patted her head. Besides, you're making friends with the strong ones, right? Gon cheerfully asked. Trying to, she said. They're, pretty hard to get close to. You made friends with a giant human-eating nine-tailed fox though, right? Aha. Gon patted her shoulder. Then I know you can do it with a few ants. I believe in you, Miwa. Miwa's eyes shined, her cheeks turning rosy. Oh. Thank you. And if not, we'll set them on fire and make s'mores over their bodies, okay? He's growing up well. Yeah. Miwa chirped while Killua gave Gon a look of disbelief. Kite, Gon, Miwa, and Killua joined up with Nav, Morel, Shoot, and Knuckles on a train heading to the Republic of East Gorto. It was a pleasant ride down. Gon braided Miwa's hair while she played a card game with Killua and repeatedly lost. Apparently, she had a crap poker face. On the border of the East Gorto, the group stopped for a hearty meal. The kids ordered a lot of meat, but Kite made them include vegetables. Gon and Miwa were particularly unhappy with that, but under Kite's glare, they relented. Kite even had the audacity to pile vegetables on Miwa's beloved pork ramen. Sacrilege! As they ate, a news report played on in the crowded bar. It talked about how the leader of the East Gordo, titled Supreme Leader, invited all the citizens to come to the capital in 10 days for a celebration. Miwa wondered what was behind that motive. The ants didn't exactly talk about their plans in front of her. She knew the Supreme Leader had been slain and Neferpita was using their corpse to control the country, but that was about it. Well, and they were still collecting and harvesting humans. Not the humans from her country, though. Ergo, not her problem. Technically, you've murdered more humans making your empire than they have just to eat. Miwa loudly slurped her ramen broth instead of responding to Kurama's snark. Did she? She didn't really keep track of the numbers. Colt believes the celebration will be used as a screening, said Morel. Who's Colt? Wondered Miwa. We don't know what they'll do with those found to have Nen, but 99% of the humans there will die, quietly added Nav. We'll need to act before then, said Kite. Our time limit is 10 days. And where's the old man? Asked Killua. Nav said, he sent an email saying that he's already inside East Gorto, but we haven't heard from him since. Eyes turned to Miwa, who was slurping her ramen noodles. Yeah, he made me teleport him inside, said Miwa, wiping her mouth as she recalled his request. He's fine? He said he had to prepare in case I couldn't reach a peaceful resolution before the time limit. At the time, Miwa didn't know what her time limit was. Netero had only told her to meet up with Kite and the others, and they'd give her more details. Now she did. 10 days. 10 days until something happened. She had exactly that long to persuade the ants out of violence. She wondered if it would be possible. Nav's phone buzzed, he pulled it out. Ah, speak of the devil. He wants us to divide into 3 pairs to draw the royal guard away from the king the night before the celebration at midnight. Oh. That's my real deadline, Miwa thought nervously. That night, the 3 friends got ready for bed. Miwa flinched upon receiving the memories of her clone that evening. Gon noticed, tilting his head as if a thought occurred to him. Miwa, you've only been sending in clones, right? Asked Gon. Aha. Maybe it's time you go in person, he said. How can they really trust you, if you don't give a little, you know? Miwa's eyes widened. Do you really think I should? Sure, he said with that sunny smile of his. If we're going to get along, we can't keep sending clones now, can we? Miwa closed her eyes, hearing the truth in his words. You're right. But, would you two be okay without me? We'll be fine, assured Gon. Right, Killua? Just go, said Killua. We have your tags in case something comes up. Okay. 10 days before the deadline. Hello, said Miwa as she teleported to the palace. Neferpito's eyes widened. Ha? Miwa smiled at them. Not a clone. No more poof, asked Neferpito. Nope, she said. I want to be friends with you, all of you, and to do that, I want to show that I trust you. Neferpito's red eyes gleamed under the moonlight. Now I see. Ha ha. I guess I'll have to be gentler with you. At least try not to decapitate me, Miwa giggled. Are you going to stay here? Is that okay? If the king allows it, said Neferpito, leaning forward to sniff Miwa. Go ask. Okay, agreed Miwa. You be right back. The king wasn't hard to find, given that he didn't try to repress his aura nor hide his scent. Miwa could hear him and someone else speaking in his favorite spot to play games. The room he had dedicated to playing his games in was a wide room with marble flooring. It had a huge doorway out to the balcony, so a lot of fresh air circulated into the room. Miwa entered it, unsurprised to find Sheapuf with the king. She's been here a while, observed Miwa. She took a seat next to Sheapuf, peering at the game being played. Sheapuf ignored her, per usual. A small woman with white hair pulled into two pigtails. Miwa remembered seeing her only yesterday. Perhaps only one day of playing wouldn't seem like a while to some, but Miwa had seen the king play with all sorts of humans, and they rarely lasted a few hours. To think the same woman was calmly playing against the king the next day. Impressive. She must have been a very intelligent woman. Miwa patiently waited for their game to end. It was oddly calming listening to the sound of their pieces moving. The king, who was normally completely silent while he played, instead called out each of his moves. The woman did the same. Maybe it was the norm for their game? 881, knight, the woman said. Miwa found she had a very sweet voice. The king reached forward and dropped several black pieces across the board. In a soft monotone, he said, I guess that's checkmate. Wow! Miwa's eyes widened. She had never seen the king lose. The woman's eyes closed. She had a big smile on her face as she started to scoop up the pieces across the board. In that sweet voice, she sincerely praised him. You're such a fast learner, supreme leader. I'll have to step up my game, or you'll get the jump on me. That's enough, the king cut in. Go get some rest. The woman sniffled. Miwa noticed she had a runny nose and wondered if the woman had a cold or something and hurriedly shook her head. That isn't necessary, I'm fine. I can play Gungi for 3 days and nights without sleep. I have another guest, the king said, his eyes trailing over to Miwa. Once I'm done, it'll be your turn. The woman seemed disappointed. Then I'll get a little rest. She bowed her head, then slowly stood up, grabbing a cane as she did so. Wait, is she blind? Miwa stared in surprise at the woman who tapped the cane in front of her as she walked away. Miwa stood up, watching the young woman walk out of the makeshift throne room. You, said the king. Not a clone anymore? No, she said, turning back to face the king with a big smile. To make friends, gotta show a little trust, right? Friendship is unnecessary, the king dismissed. Having fun is also unnecessary, Miwa pointed out. But it adds color to life, don't you think? The king gave a short nod. Do as you like. Miwa beamed. Sheapuf shut his book with a sharp snap, standing up to approach the king. What do you think of this game? Gungi, right? Miwa thought. The king had played all sorts of games. It's only a matter of time, answered the king as he started to reset the board. There are more options to choose from, but essentially, this game is no different from the rest. In 4 or 5 more games, she will have to use her real ability. Once that happens, I shall be able to observe her rhythm. Nothing has changed. Shall we dance? Goosebumps trailed down Miwa's arms at the whispered memory, too far gone for her to properly recall. Menthathuyupi stepped into the room, holding a piece of paper. He said, Your Majesty, the Go player hanged himself. The king bitterly laughed. Bring that idiot woman back. Girl, you can sleep in the Go player's room. Oh my god, please no, she squawked, her face pale. Sheapuf beamed. I will personally escort her there. You are an ass, proof, Miwa told the butterfly ant as he grabbed her by the arm and started to drag her away. No, I don't want to sleep in a dead guy's room. The king let out the briefest of smiles at her woes. Neferpitou took pity upon the crying Miwa and let Miwa stay in their room with them. Better to keep an eye on her anyway, pointed out Neferpitou. Fine, said Sheapuf. She's your responsibility. Gon and Killua. Gon and Killua were their own diversion team. They snuck into the country. Killua took lead in the dead of night. As the boys walked through a dense forest, they quietly discussed what they needed to do next. We need to draw the guards away from the king, mused Killua. Meh, said Gon. What, you don't think so? Miwa will succeed, he said. We should instead be focusing on preventing casualties. Killua frowned, looking over at Gon. You really think she'll be able to befriend those monsters? Why not? Gon shrugged. She can make friends with anyone. Killua put his hands in his pockets. He looked up at the clear starry sky. I guess. So, Gon said pointedly, we should try to keep the casualties down. I don't think the ants are going out and mass executing the humans, Killua said dryly. The country has been operating as normal according to the reports, which means the majority of the civilians don't even know about the ants. I don't think there'd be no casualties though, right? They eat humans. A lot of humans. But Miwa said they could eat other food. She also said they were still eating humans. The boys sighed. We're on the outskirts of the country right now, said Killua. Let's see what information we can obtain and go from there. Gon nodded in agreement. The two friends continued to quietly move through the forest until they reached a town. Killua signaled for Gon to stay hidden while he assessed it. Killua stealthily examined the first house, then motioned for Gon to come over. Curious, Gon joined Killua at the house and the two entered. Gon let out a soft ha. It's completely deserted. Maybe everyone already left for the capital? No, something happened here, Killua disagreed. And someone's trying to hide it. Look closer. Gon squinted. It took him several seconds to realize there were bloodstains on the floor and a few bullet holes in the walls. Ah, there's a blood trail. It leads out the front door. We're going to see more dead bodies, aren't we? Asked Gon as he pulled out the pine-scented bottle of oil he kept in his pocket. Then he remembered Miwa wasn't there. He slowly put it back. Killua and Gon followed the blood trail, noting how several more houses convened with it. At the end, they found a bunch of corpses half buried in the ground. The whole village is probably buried here, concluded Killua. Wouldn't someone notice that? Gon's brow furrowed. This is the true purpose of the national celebration, explained Killua. It's a pretense for entire populations of towns and cities to vanish without raising suspicion. The selection has already begun. In hindsight, it would be tough to summon all citizens to the capital and make the selection so quickly. This nation has a population of around 5 million. Clearing out one town or city at a time is more effective. In that case, their only concern would be co-workers or family members raising a fuss over the missing. But with the pretext of the national celebration, no one will find it strange that they can't contact someone. In this nation, cell phones aren't allowed, so if they believe that the other party is traveling, it makes sense they can't contact them. The selection would go very smoothly. The capital city, Beijing, is in the southeast corner. They only need to attack the farthest towns first and work their way east. If each town is told that the government will assign its people a time to depart, there won't be any problems regarding communication between towns. Gon sighed. So, by preventing people from meeting between towns to travel together, they eliminate any cause for commotion. But doesn't this mean they have to run around the nation to attack all 5 million citizens? Yeah. If 1% survives, that gives them 50,000 soldiers. No, before that. There are 10 or Gon looked up at the sky to check that it had passed midnight. 9 days left. If you wanted to check 5 million people in that time, you'd need a lot of help. Assuming that one NIN user can check 10,000 citizens in 10 days, 500 NIN users. Exactly. You're getting at the fact that there's only 3 royal ants and not many that can use NIN? Killua asked. They don't need NIN users to check everyone. They can use manipulation. Miwa said the cat ant could use puppets, right? More than one puppet at a time, can probably set some auto commands, too? They're probably using puppets to command a small army or something. Gon smiled. Then to limit the casualties, all we gotta do is stop the puppets and save the humans? Then let's do that, said Gon. You sure? Asked Killua. Don't wanna stick to the old man's plan of sneakin' in all the way? No, said Gon. I believe in Miwa. Then he grinned widely. Let's see who can save the most. Killua laughed. All right. Keep in touch, okay? 9 days before the deadline. Living in the palace was rather peaceful so far. Miwa did not require much sleep, and as she soon learned, neither did the ants. Neferpitou had even learned to keep up their end around the palace while dozing. Being in the palace made Miwa acutely more aware of the other ants, and they of her. Some would give her looks, but they always looked away when they noticed Neferpitou or Sheapuff near her. A few even bowed. It's kind of weird. Not really. As far as they're concerned, you belong to the royal guards. Those three have gone out of their way to be touching you every time one of those weaker bugs is around you. They have? You need to pay more attention to how people treat you. You're too oblivious to the subtle nuances. Am not. I can spot Sundaras. What's that supposed to mean? You know exactly why I said it. Miwa was delighted to learn that Neferpitou did not mind if Miwa slept on their lap or shoulder. The first time Miwa slept in the cat ant's room, she had plopped down right next to Neferpitou. They were close enough to be touching, and when Miwa's eyes grew heavy, she leaned on their shoulder. Neferpitou made no move to dissuade her. Miwa took it as a sign that the cat ant was okay becoming sleep buddies. In the morning, Miwa woke up with Neferpitou snoozing quietly, still cuddled up next to Miwa. It filled Miwa with such overwhelming warmth she couldn't stop smiling. So delighted, so delighted, she even hugged Sheapuff the next time she saw him. He looked at her with disdain, but he did not push her away. She almost cried, she was so dang happy. Progress. Over 2 months of consistently working on becoming their friends, and it was starting to feel like that effort was being paid off. Maybe there was a chance for a peaceful resolution. Fucking therapy no jutsu ruins everything. Sheapuff continued to watch the king play with that young human woman from the morning to afternoon. Miwa and Neferpitou dropped by, curious to see how the match was going. The human woman had been continuously playing with the king for days, after all, a feat Miwa hadn't even been able to do. How is she? Asked Neferpitou. Sheapuff reluctantly admitted in a low voice, I am concerned. The king has not come close to defeating her, she is a true Gungi master. Isn't that good? Whispered Miwa. Wouldn't be any fun for him if he won so easily. Sheapuff grimaced while Neferpitou nodded in agreement. I'm done, that's checkmate, muttered the king. He reset the board, glaring at the blind woman who smiled serenely. Next game. Yes, she chirped. She's kinda cute, Miwa whispered. Is not, Sheapuff immediately rebuffed. You should make yourself useful and get us more food. Miwa stuck her tongue out at the butterfly ant. You're a stinker butt. Any requests? You mentioned something called a samjitang, said Neferpitou. I want to try that. Miwa brightened. Okay. Poof. Whatever you bring will be equally distasteful, he said. Then why ask? Miwa knew better than to say that. She learned that the man would lie as easily as breathing, and would go through great pains before ever admitting he liked something associated with Miwa. Miwa figured it was a tsundere thing and didn't take it to heart, most of the time. Honey glazed chicken for you then, she said. I'll go check with Yuppie. Miwa looked over at the king and the young woman. She didn't know their names. The king because he did not have a name, and the woman because she never had an opportunity to ask. I'll ask when they're done playing, Miwa promised herself, looking over at her. While I'm out, I should see if I can get some cold medicine for her since she's got a runny nose. Taking a seat beside Sheapuff, she tried to wait out their game. But then it started to softly rain. Miwa found it hard to keep her eyes open after an hour of waiting. Her head fell forward onto Sheapuff's lap and she fell asleep. It was a pity she missed the way Sheapuff gently brushed her bangs out of her face while she slept. Day 7. Killua. Killua had been moving for over 30 hours straight. He was completely out of breath, sweaty, and exhausted. He had been luckier than Gon. All the towns Gon had found so far were already deserted, so Gon hadn't been able to save anyone just yet. Killua, on the other hand, already fought several squadrons and warned over a dozen towns. Rest now? Or keep going? He knew Gon wouldn't be slowing down anytime soon. I should take up as much of a lead as I can, Killua figured. Gon won the last bet and Killua still had to say eat me to Miwa because of it, so he was doubly determined to win this one. Right. Let's keep going east. And now I'm being followed, Killua thought in irritation. He couldn't be certain how long it started, but he noticed that there was an ant in the sky. It flew above him as he ran through the wilds. He's way out of range for my yo-yo, and I'm too tired to use ninjutsu. He was confident he could fight atop water or use chakra to cling vertically to a surface in the heat of battle, but anything more intense than that would be questionable. Chakra was a lot harder and consequently more tiring to use than nen. But if I don't lose the ant, I'll be in trouble. Killua spotted a dense forest at the bottom of the cliff he was running alongside. That should work, he thought, leaping off the edge. If the ant descends to follow, it'll be in range of my yo-yo. Killua ran through the forest for another minute before diving in the underbrush to see if the ant would follow. He waited patiently, but to his annoyance, it was not the dragonfly ant that would assault him, but more ants that had been waiting in the forest. He clicked his tongue in annoyance, killing them quickly. One of them tried to escape, and when Killua pursued him, it exploded a fart at him with enough firepower to rival a dozen grenades. It was more offensive than damaging, although it did ruin his sleeves. And stank. The fact it even timed that explosion perfectly despite me being behind it means it received instructions elsewhere. Probably from that dragonfly ant. It must still be watching from above, or have the ability to track me from a distance. Killua grimaced as he continued to run after the fleeing ant. I'll have to make sure to keep my abilities hidden for as long as possible then. At least until I take out that. Something slammed into the left side of his forehead, forcing Killua to stumble. A gun? Killua thought, instantly irritated. He had been shot before, and it certainly felt like a sniper rifle. No, this doesn't feel like a bullet. Digging at his forehead, he pulled out an odd flea-shaped bullet covered in nin. Gross. He was shot at again, that time in the neck. He ripped out the flea, annoyance, and disdain making him curse as he scowled. Where is it coming from? A third shot. A fourth shot. At this rate I'll pass out from blood loss. Killua gritted his teeth, frustrated by the assault. He forced himself to focus on his nin, expanding his aura out to act as a sensitive barrier. I need to find that sniper. As soon as the next bullet hit his aura, Killua calculated where it came from and off he went. Killua broke through the trees of the forest, his pale blue eyes cold and glittering with malice. He hated being shot at, he especially hated being injured. It was an insult to his pride as assassin. More so, he knew if he was the only one getting injured during the bet, then Gon would never let him live it down. He was already impossibly smug about winning the last bet. And Miwa will get anxious. He knew she hated seeing them hurt. He saw the conflict ion in her expression every time she spotted a new bruise or injury on them. No matter how much she tried to hide it, or push past it, it clearly upset her. He didn't want that. Killua spotted a lone man standing atop one of many stone pillars. There you are, Killua thought, sprinting. The man jumped down, running away. You aren't escaping me. Killua caught up to the man within seconds, but to his surprise, the sniper had stopped running. Instead, he lounged against a small cave entrance. The man smirked. This is a trap. You still want to come? The man jumped into the cave at the same instant Killua leaped. The man barely got a meter into the cave before Killua landed on his shoulders, his gaze cruelly apathetic. Killua dug his left middle finger straight through the man's skull to pierce his brain, as his right hand gripped the man's head and snapped his neck. Couldn't care less, Killua said coldly. Die. Wanna see hell? Cackled a voice as red tentacles shot out of the man's mouth, wrapping around Killua. Killua's eyes narrowed as he noticed that the bottom of the cave was actually an underground lake. No, thanks, Killua said flatly, chopping off the tentacles and using them to cling onto one of the stalactites. The corpse of the sniper fell into the water. Killua watched it be devoured by what he assumed to be fish ants. The tentacles belonged to a plump red octopus ant that used its remaining tentacles to grab onto a stalactite opposite of Killua. Killua stared at it. Are you an octopus? Don't call me an octopus. The octopus ant transformed one of its tentacles into a gun. If I got shot by another damn flea. See ya, said the octopus ant, shooting out a stream of air and using it to rocket away. Pfft, what? Killua had to admit that was rather cartoonishly amusing. All the ants he had met before were arrogant or bloodthirsty, so seeing one comically run away from him was refreshing. Killua jumped after the octopus ant, easily catching it by the gun and grabbing onto another stalactite. Hello again. Hi. A long time no see, the ant chuckled nervously. Why ya know? Killua stared at it, keeping his face neutral to hide his amusement. Can I ask you something? Sure, go ahead. Why didn't you dive underwater to escape? Killua slyly asked. You should have an advantage in the water. His lips curled into a sneering smirk. Don't tell me you can't swim. You WL. Seeing the ant become so panicked made Killua want to smirk. He tried not to relish the misery of others, but some habits seemed ingrained in his very blood. There was something deeply satisfying about watching the gleam in someone's eyes as they realized their life was in his hands. Killua gleefully continued, "'Cause you're bleeding, right? When they smell blood, your buddies in the water go berserk and attack the injured, no matter who it is. With those wounds, if you went in there, you'd be torn to shreds. Well, yeah. I suppose that's one way to, No, we're still fighting." Killua blinked. Ha! To Killua's sadistic delight, the octopus ant made a horrified expression. It reminded Killua like what a dog might look like when it realized it broke its master's favorite vase. Re-eyed, drawled out Killua mockingly. You all communicate via telepathy. Talking to your boss? It's the guy who was flying over me, right? Let's make a deal then. If you tell me about his power, I'll spare your life. Probably not. The octopus ant's face screwed up in intense displeasure. Tears started to build in its eyes. Killua hadn't seen an ant cry before. That'd be fun. 6 seconds, said Killua as he wondered if he could get it to sob before he killed it. I wanted to be reborn as a squid, said the octopus ant suddenly. What? I would have given anything to have been a Chiroteuthis imperator. Do you think octopi and squid are similar? If so, you're mistaken. Octopi are ugly. Squid are squidorific. I think they look divine. Killua flatly said, 2 seconds. I won't betray a buddy, said the octopus ant, chopping off the gun tentacle Killua had used to catch it. Aha! Killua caught it before it made its final descent, his lips twitching as he fought back a smile. Damn, Killua thought. That was actually kinda. WHY, the octopus ant cried out. 'Cause you're cool, admitted Killua with a smile. Who knows? We could become good friends. Plus, if I spare at least one ant, Gon and Miwa will be happy, right? Unfortunately for Killua, things didn't end that simply in the cave. He got careless. When the fish ants from the underground lake leaped up to attack him, he didn't notice one of them tagged him with part of an Nen ability. It was a type of long-ranged teleportation. The Nen user would throw darts at a board, and each spot on the board would correlate to a spot on Killua's body. Killua had no way to exercise the ability. To make things worse, it took him too long to figure out what was happening and how to handle it. He got cocky, wanting to deal with it on his own. He put his life on the line, and when the final shot was aimed at his brain, he was barely able to stop it in time and play dead to lure the Nen user out. Of course, even after he killed the user, it was too late. He had lost a lot of blood. He didn't have much strength left. Lame, he thought. The tag in his pocket, he shakily pulled it out. So lame. His fingers were coated in his blood, and his body trembled. I'm sorry. The world started to turn fuzzy and gray as the last of his strength was used to tear the tag. I didn't want you to see me like this. Day 7. Miwa. Miwa felt the Haration tag tear and she moved without thought. She had 1 second to process Killua falling forward, covered in injuries as blood oozed from the holes in his body. 1 second to process. 1 second to accept. 1 second to not fucking destroy everything. No. 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 She caught him, flipping him over as she ripped out her emergency medical scroll. She had a reflex to take him, but where? The only hospital she knew was in Soleil, and he needed help now. He needed help within seconds, not the minutes it would take to teleport there, track down a doctor, and have them rush aid to him. Please, no, please, please. She was not a doctor by any means, but she was a kunoichi. She knew trauma care like she knew how to slowly peel off human skin in a way they would not die for hours. She remembered learning it after. I'm sorry, he said quietly, his eyes not straying from hers. Little dove. His heart stopped beating below her right hand, and she squeezed his hand with her left hand. Oh, was all she could say. Her heart thumped and jumped and pounded in her chest. Each beat was painful, hot, and unbearably sharp. She trembled, her stomach heaving as her eyes burned. She had prepared medical scrolls for each of her precious people. Killua's emergency scroll had AB blood, so she got bags of it set up and ready for insertion. She created clones within seconds, surrounding him. One hooked him up, while another immediately applied disinfectant to all open wounds, and a third prepped the bandages. A couple of the injuries were deep enough to warrant stitches, and so a fourth and fifth clone worked on them. No matter how quickly she moved, it did not feel fast enough. She shook, anxiety and fear clawing viciously at her. He was cold. He was cold. He was cold. She shivered, unable to stop the tears as a flood of different memories bounced in her head. She hated how his blood smelled, hated how cold he felt, hated how she was too late again. Don't leave me again, she croaked. Miwa herself pulled Killua's head into her lap, brushing out his bangs to soothe him and her that everything would be okay now. It had to be. It had to be, right? She showed up, right? He was still breathing, still. Hi, Killua quietly whispered. He was already regaining color as soon as she hooked up the blood for. He was too cold. If she could give him her heart to warm up, she would have done so in an instant. Shut up, she told him, her voice raspy. She was immensely relieved that it looked like none of his vital organs had been hit. He was on the verge of death due to blood loss, not because the enemy had ruptured anything critical. Miwa wasn't the best at suturing, but it was better than nothing. He could be saved. She wasn't too late. Everything will be okay. Everything will be okay. Everything will be okay, she chanted to herself, her hands trembling as she held his cheeks and bowed her head to press her forehead against his. Even as she knew, hoped, prayed, begged he would be okay, the terror would not abate. She bit hard on her bottom lip to keep from whimpering as she struggled not to cry. Once the immediate injuries were taken care of, her clones popped one by one. The last one to go set up a second AB blood bag since he had already taken in the first one. She let out a long, shaky breath. She lifted her head. Hi, he said again. Shut up, she repeated, her entire body trembling. Her bottom lip quivered. She tenderly brushed the bangs out from his eyes. Please don't cry, he said. Shut up, she whispered, hating the burning tears that slipped out of her and fell on his face. If you don't shut up and stay shut up, I will make you shut up. Shut up and rest. Is he going to be okay? Miwa had not moved to destroy the nearby ants that she smelled and sensed because her priority was Killua. She would not leave his side until she was certain he was stable. That being said, Miwa coldly looked up, malice leaking from her. Relax, Miwa, said Killua. She pulled back her aura, frowning at the octopus ant that hobbled over to them. He's a cool guy, he said. Friend? Miwa asked warily. Sure, said Killua. Miwa forced a fake smile at the octopus ant. She didn't feel like smiling at all. She wanted to weep. She wanted to scream in rage. She wanted to squash whoever hurt Killua so much. Hi. He'll be okay. As long as he shuts up now. Killua weakly mimed zipping his lips. I'm Miwa, said Miwa, using her left hand to wipe her eyes. She sniffled. What's your name? Ikalgo, the octopus ant said, stumbling over his name. Ikalgo, Miwa repeated, trying to channel some warmth in her voice despite how distraught she was. Can you tell me who hurt him? They're already dead, said Killua. Killua. I know, shutting up now. I know a doctor, Ikalgo said. Someone neutral. If you're lying, she said, I will boil you alive. Weren't you the one who wanted to make nice with the human-eating ants? Miwa rendered Killua unconscious. "We're going to my hospital," she said, offering a hand to the octopus ant. "Take my hand." Icalgo placed a tentacle in her hand and she teleported the three of them to Soleil. It was chaotic. Miwa knew it would be. Soleil's hospital was only a few months old, so it had excellent equipment, but it was still adjusting to its own routine. Thankfully, Miwa had already tended to the worst of Killua's injuries, so they could afford to wait the extra few minutes it took for the doctors to recognize Miwa, find a room for Killua, and tend to him. None of them even spared Icalgo a second look. Soleil was the city for the unwanted to find a home. He might have been the first chimera ant there, but he wasn't the first non-human resident. Killua was given a private room, and Miwa crawled into his bed. She curled into his side, taking extra care not to bother any of the hooked-up IVs or touch any injuries that had required stitches. She wished the tears would stop. She wished the memories would go away. He's alive. He's alive. Everything will be okay. Right? Everything will be okay. Promise? Promise. She hiccuped, rubbing furiously at her eyes. I don't want to be alone. You won't be. I hate being alone. I know. I don't want them to leave me again. I know. Kurama, I'm scared. It'll be okay. She wept, thoughts and memories bouncing around in her head like a symphony of misery. She curled into a tight ball as she remembered terrible, terrible things. She had lived more than one life. She had looped. She had died a lot. She had failed a lot. Sometimes she could save them. Sometimes she could not even save herself. Those mistakes bit into her, digging underneath her skin. They buried her under their heavy burden, suffocating her. She choked as she sobbed, unable to catch enough air. Let go, Kurama soothed. He pulled those memories away from her. Piece by piece, he took them back, emptying her mind and thoughts. Each tragedy, each mistake, each death he consumed and hid away from her. Focus on the present, he told her. Focus on what's in front of you. The pain lingered, but it was less focused. She felt like she could breathe again, an unknown weight lifted from her. Her mind was fuzzy again, everything out of center and hard to focus. Her hiccups died away, exhaustion pressing upon her like waves on a beach. She laid down beside her friend. She placed her head over his chest, listening to his heartbeat. Each time she heard it thump, some of her anxiety melted away. Bit by bit, she found that her anger and fear ebbed away. Ba dump. One breath in. Ba dump. One breath out. Ba dump. She closed her eyes, her body relaxing. Please, she whispered, don't leave me again. 6 days until the celebration. It was before dawn when Killua woke up the following morning. Miwa stirred upon hearing his low groans. It took Miwa several moments of confusion until she kind of remembered what happened. She couldn't recall the details, and the whole event felt detached. Dummy, petulantly muttered Miwa, nuzzling into his chest. I hurt, he whined. Did you have to hit my head that hard? You weren't shutting up. Killua patted her back, resting his cheek atop her head. Guess so. I'm not taking you back until you get the all clear from the doctor. Where did you take me? Miwa paused, her mind oddly fuzzy. Soleil. He sighed. Are you mad at me? She asked. No, he said. Thank you for worrying about me. Always, she said. Always, and always, and always, and always. Killua hid his smile from Miwa. Chapter 36, Lammergeier 9. Later that afternoon. It was raining when she returned to the palace. It came down softly, each drop splattered against the marble and concrete. Miwa's mind was fuzzier than pulled-apart cotton balls. When she teleported to the marker set upon the balcony, it took her several seconds to realize that it was even raining. Where'd you jeep? Oh, is that something yummy I smell? Asked Neferpitou. Miwa had stopped by a bakery in Soleil before she returned. The blonde pigtailed girl slowly turned to face the cat ant. She tried out a smile. Butter buns and milk coconut buns. Neferpitou held out their hands expectantly and Miwa gave them the whole box. Smells divine. They leaned in, tilting their head. Miwa? How come your eyes are all puffy? They asked. Oh, someone I cared about got hurt and I was upset, she admitted. Like if your king got hurt. Neferpitou's eyes widened briefly. There was a heartbeat of silence between the two. Only the sound of gentle rain could be heard. They reached forward and gently cupped Miwa's cheek. Softly, they said, "I'm sorry they got hurt." Miwa closed her eyes and leaned into their touch. "Thank you." Neferpitou had given Miwa a towel to pat herself dry. It wasn't raining too heavily yet, so Miwa wasn't soaked enough to need to change her clothes. Miwa hugged Neferpitou as thanks, the cat ant accepting the affection with a small smile. As Neferpitou was on guard duty, Miwa decided to check in on the king and Sheapuf. 991, Marshal, intoned the king. Miwa sat next to Sheapuf, turning so she could rest her chin on his knee. Sheapuf lifted his hands holding his book up a bit more, then rested them atop Miwa's head while he read. 151, Marshal, said the young woman. 791, Pawn. 231, Pawn. 811, Spy. 231, Cannon. 911, Fortress. 272, Musketeer, she said. The king smiled. I'll call this remote concealment. 712, Fortress. There was a moment of hesitation on her end until she said, 162, General. 913, Archer. 322, Major General, she said. I'm done, said the king. She bowed. Let us begin, then. 193, New Archer. 971, New Spy. 291, Knight. 551, Lieutenant General. For the first time since Miwa had seen the young woman play with the king, the woman paused for more than a few seconds. In fact, she paused for nearly a minute. Wow, is the king finally going to win? Miwa thought in surprise. 921, New Lieutenant General, the young woman said, placing a new piece on the board. The king stiffened, then threw his pieces upon the board. That's checkmate. The young woman closed her blind eyes. You knew my strategy was a dead end, the king accused. Yes, she whispered. Why did you need to think before making your move, he demanded. You could have made that move at once. Your remote concealment strategy is actually named Cocorico. She shyly smiled. I came up with that strategy 10 years ago. Placing the lieutenant general in the center to counter a three-pronged attack is also a move I devised, called General in the Middle. At the time, both drew a lot of attention. Moving from Cocorico to General in the Middle was a popular transition that tested both players' ability to read their opponents. She sheepishly scratched the back of her head before continuing, I was pretty happy that a fool like me could figure out a smart strategy, but then I saw how to defeat it. A year after I came up with Cocorico, an opponent used it against me in a national tournament, and I figured out how to counter it. I won the match, but the strategy disappeared from official matches and textbooks. That the supreme leader thought of the same strategy as I had. She fidgeted, abashed. I was so honored and touched, my heart trembled. It felt like seeing my child brought back to life. That was how it felt. So, it was difficult for me to take that life again. That was why I hesitated. Foolishness, said the king, standing up and walking away. I've had enough. Get some rest. The young woman lowered her head, her brow furrowed as if disappointed. Once we begin again, said the king, you won't get any more breaks. Be prepared. Why yes. Ah, this is my chance, thought Miwa, getting up. Miwa used that opportunity to approach the young woman. She had been meaning to introduce herself to the woman for some time, but it was hard to time it right since she played with the king so often. Hello, said Miwa, moving to kneel in front of her. Ah, hello, the young woman said in surprise. Miwa carefully took the young woman's hands in her own, grasping them tightly. It's very nice to meet you. Please call me Miwa. Ah, she said. Your hands, the young woman smiled. They're very cute. Miwa's heart thumped. You're cute, Miwa whispered, her cheeks warmed as she stared at the young woman. Me, she squawked. And no. As surely not. You Miwa smiled at her, squeezing her hands. What can I call you? I'm Kamugi, she stammered, her cheeks bright red. Kamugi, Miwa repeated. Let's be friends, okay? Kamugi's face only grew redder by the second as she stumbled. Yes, thank you. Miwa, Sheapuf intoned. Go get food. Stinker, she muttered, pulling away from Kamugi. Kamugi, is there anything you want? I wouldn't dare to ask of such a thing. Do you like sweets? Miwa pressed. Anything is fine, really. I'll just get food that's good for people who are sick, thought Miwa, standing up. Okay. Miwa skipped over to Shea Poof. Poof, do you want anything specific? Crepes, he said flatly. Miwa saluted, turning on her heel to leave to see what the other guards would want. Miwa, Shea Poof said after she turned around. Miwa turned back. Yes? Your eyes. Yes? He was silent for several seconds, hazel eyes narrowed. You should tend to them. They're unsightly like that. Make sure it doesn't happen again. Miwa smiled weakly in response. After Miwa collected and dropped off the food, she found she had a rare opportunity to speak to the king alone. The Chimera Ant King sat upon his throne, barely acknowledging when Miwa brought him the cream puffs. Hey, Your Majesty, asked Miwa. She had refrained from bringing up any heavy conversations directly with the king. Miwa had learned from experience, asking pondering questions could lead to arguments. Loud, long, and draining arguments. Especially if Shea Poof was in the vicinity. The butterfly ant had a sixth sense for whenever Miwa was going to ask a question and seemed to always be in the area. She had wanted to ask right away, but didn't want to needlessly start an argument and sour her beginning introductions. She felt like she had to wait for the right moment, and at that moment her gut said it was time. The ant glanced in her direction. Why do you want to rule? She asked him. He twitched. Why? He repeated slowly, eyes narrowing. It is my duty. Why? She asked. Does it make you happy? Happy, the king was normally monotone, yet he had a note of perplexion when repeating that. Happy, she said. You know, like when you play games? You seem happy when you're playing with that sweet girl. He shifted his weight, eyes moving away from Miwa as he stared out the window. Happy, huh? Miwa tilted her head, a thought occurring to her. It's okay if you don't know. Why? He asked in turn. Shouldn't I? No one is born knowing everything, she said. Life is about figuring out what you want. It's a journey. You can be whatever you want to be, and sometimes you can be things you never thought you'd be. Miwa smiled. I never thought I'd be an empress, but in my city. You're a ruler? Yeah. The normally stoic king had a moment of emotional lapse as a faint look of disdain flickered across his face. I pity your people. Ha! Miwa gasped. That is so not nice to say. The king stared at her, his tail raised as if he was debating on attacking her not. Miwa thought, turning on their heel and leaving before he came to a decision. Why are you running? You know why. I'm trying to make friends, and if he attacks me, I don't know if I'll be nice enough to let it slide. Unsurprisingly, the Shea Poof was on his way back to the throne room and ran into her. Poof, Miwa cried, running out of the throne room. I told the king I was also a ruler, and he said he pitied my people too. A very brief giggle escaped Shea Poof before the guard quickly covered it up with a cough. Ahem, well, he has excellent insight. Miwa hung her head, resting her forehead against Shea Poof's abdomen. The butterfly ant sighed. What do you want? You're supposed to give head pats when someone hangs their head in pain and go there, he said flatly, patting the top of her head. Thank you. Miwa played a riveting game of bullshit with Neferpito and Menthothoyupi that lasted well over 5 hours. Neferpito claimed victory, even when Menthothoyupi and Miwa teamed up to try and take down the cat ant. Tragically, Menthothoyupi and Miwa were simply awful at poker faces and prone to falling for Neferpito's tricks. Some might even call them gullible. They wouldn't. But some would. The rain continued to pour as the afternoon waned into the evening. Miwa decided to see if the king was playing with Komugi again. Amazingly, he was. Miwa took her seat beside Shea Poof, pleasantly surprised that there was now a cushion beside the stool. Who placed this here? Miwa wondered, glancing at Shea Poof, who did not acknowledge her existence as she sat beside him. The king and Komugi set up for another game. The king said, for this match, we should make a wager. Komugi raised her head in surprise. A wager? Correct, the king softly said. If you win, I shall grant any wish you request. Any wish? Komugi folded her arms together, her brow furrowed. Any wish, NNN. However, the king said, smiling in dark mirth upon seeing Komugi squirm, if you lose, I shall take your left arm. My left arm, my left arm, Ah! Should I do it? Kamugi scratched at her head, perplexed by the king's wager. Why do you hesitate? The king asked. Well, instead of my left arm, Kamugi began, pointing at herself, is it all right if I bet the thing I usually bet? The king leaned back in surprise. What? What do you bet? Kamugi smiled serenely. My life. The king's eyes widened. Kamugi went on, if I lose, I will offer you my life. She rubbed at her head again, a touch sheepish. But you might consider that an insult. The king stared at her in disbelief. I do not understand. Explain yourself. Well, gungi is really the only thing I can do. In other words, gungi is the reason I'm alive. But professional gungi players, even national champions, make but a pittance. Only after you become the world champion as representative for a nation will you receive any meaningful reward. To become the national representative, you must win tournaments. In other words, you cannot lose a single match. I come from a family of 12, and in our home, I'm the breadwinner. If I lose a single match, I will become the greatest burden on my family. Gungi players have a saying that, after losing once, a gungi master becomes a normal person. If I lose, I'll be garbage. She quickly added, it doesn't bother me. It's just what my parents always said. So the day I set my sights on becoming a professional player, I decided that if I ever lost a match I would take my own life. She paused. But that could be a problem. How so? When I lose, I'll become garbage. And all you'd receive for winning would be garbage. That would be a terrible insult. That hurts my heart for some reason, Miwa thought, leaning into Sheapuff's leg. Despite Kamugi's dismal words, her voice remained serenely sweet. Kamugi genuinely believed in what she said with all of her heart. Her life only mattered on how well she played. She only had value as a gungi player. The day she lost, she was trash, and her life was forfeit. The king said, it doesn't bother me. I'm more interested in learning what you'd want if you win. Her brow furrowed again, and she folded her arms back over her chest. You see, I spent all my time thinking about gungi, so, I'll think about it later, after I win. Very well, the king replied softly, his eyes never straying from her face. His lips curled in a cold smile before he chuckled darkly. Your life, was it? It appears I was the one lacking in resolve. I never imagined that, if you won, you might ask for my life. Your Majesty. Sheapuff sharply interjected. Whoa! Did she really ask for that? How did I miss that? Not directly. The fact that the baby says that, however, implies he respects her enough to consider it an option. The king snapped, silence. The supreme leader's Li Kamugi frantically waved her hands. IW would never ask such a thing. The thought never crossed my mind. I know that, said the king. The fault is my own. The wager is off. It was a petty tactic. No, she said at the same time the Ant King ripped off his left arm. Miwa gasped. Karama laughed. Sheapuff let out an undignified scream/gasp. The Ant King dropped his arm on the floor, blue blood gushed out of it, splattering Kamugi. The king said, accept this apology. Kamugi reached up to touch her fast, undoubtedly feeling the warm blood on her but not understanding what happened. Why, Your Majesty? Sheapuff rushed to his side. How could you do this? The butterfly ant ripped off his sleeve. I must treat your arm. Yandere, whispered Miwa in awe. She had heard tales of the archetype from Shelnark since he was trying to convince her to try something called an otome game, but Miwa never expected to meet one in reality. As Sheapuff wrapped his sleeve around the king's now stumped arm, the king said, continue the match. A arm? Kamugi squeaked. He ripped off his arm, Miwa told her. Kamugi gasped. Continue the match, repeated the king. I refuse, she said. I refuse to move before you have your injury treated. The king raised his tail, the tip of it pointed at her throat. He said flatly, don't make me repeat myself. Make your move. I refuse, she said sharply. If you wish to kill me, use gungi. Why you? The king glowered darkly at her. Tears pooled at her eyes and she trembled. She did not dare refuse or back down. TT, summon Pito. At once, agreed Sheapuff, who quickly left the room. Miwa moved to sit beside Komugi, pulling out her handkerchief. Gently, she cupped the young woman's face and started to wipe the blood off her. Komugi flinched in surprise, but recognized the touch of Miwa's hands. Thank you, Miwa. Amen. Miwa wiped away Komugi's snot as well, glancing over at the king who glared at them. Think we'll ever live in a world where violence and gore aren't normal? Miwa wondered. I hope not. That sounds painfully boring. One day until the deadline. Miwa was doing a handstand with Neferpito perched on her feet. They were competing to see who could hold the position the longest. It wasn't a test of strength, both were plenty strong, rather who could deal with the headache of the blood rushing to the head for so long. Neferpito set the record at 1 hour, and now it was up to Miwa to break it. I'm getting dizzy. You fucking lose to a sage-damned ant and I will never let you sleep again. Pito, the king sharply called. Oh, thank God, breathed Miwa as Neferpito hopped off Miwa's feet. Miwa wobbled on her handstand before toppling to the tiled balcony. Neferpito kneeled before the king. Yes, what do you need? The king glanced away. Poof. Sheapuff stepped out from a pillar. Yes. Yuppie. Menthathu Yuppie walked out onto the balcony. Yes. Sheapuff and Menthathu Yuppie moved to kneel on either side of Neferpito. Sheapuff asked, Is something the matter? Poof. Yes? Right, you're Poof, said the king, folding his arms across his chest. Then what is my name? Sheapuff said, I must speak with the utmost respect, your majesty. You are the king. You have no other name. You are the one and only king. At the moment, there are impostors using that name without permission, but we will eliminate them all. The entire world will know there is only one king. That assumes the others can be eliminated, said the king. King is a title. A title can be bestowed, and it is not a name. What of you, Yuppie? Menthathu Yuppie said, Your question is far beyond my capacity. I cannot think of a way to provide an answer. Pito? Meow, I believe that your feelings are what matter most, said Neferpito. You should select the name that you find the most pleasing. A pause. The king glanced at Miwa. Miwa. I'd say the same thing as Pito, said Miwa. I chose this name for myself. I see. Respectfully, you can choose a name after the selection. Right now, our priority is to finish all the preparations before tomorrow, said Sheapuff. The king was silent, looking away. Your Majesty? Sheapuff probed. Is something wrong? If you have any concerns, we shall address them. That is why we are here. Komugi's entire body was glowing, said the king. Sheapuff hesitated. Komugi? The girl with the closed eyes. She experienced an awakening. Komugi will become much stronger, although only at Gungi. Pito. Yes? If Komugi were put through the selection that will occur tomorrow, what would happen? Neferpito answered, she would die. The selection chooses humans with physical and mental strength to serve as soldiers. The survivors will be those who demonstrate excellent combat abilities. After meeting Komugi, I've learned that strength can manifest in different ways. For example, during our trip here I killed a child. Perhaps the child had the potential to surpass me in a certain field. Yet I extinguished that potential. I extinguished it for no real reason. I am. A surge of nin burst from the king, his aura flaring to life. King. He laughed without joy. He laughed without happiness. It rang hollow and empty, a false bravado set up only for himself. I took a life for no reason at all. What tremendous strength I must possess. I appear with no warning to rob countless beings of their inferior strength. To crush, to destroy, that is my power. Brute force is the strongest power in this world. Miwa's eyes narrowed. What a hollow statement. What a hollow king. Miwa walked behind the king as he slowly moved across the palace to Komugi's room. What are you going to do? An empty laugh. A bravado of force and power. What are you going to do? He moved slowly, ignoring Miwa's footsteps behind him. Komugi was someone the king had shown kindness to. If the king hurt Komugi, if he hurts her, I don't think there'll be a way to resolve this peacefully before the deadline. Are you prepared? Niwa smelled the blood before they reached the room. Faint, but present enough to warrant concern. Komugi was already hurt, but how? The king opened her bedroom door. Niwa only had a split second to see that a large bird had broken into Komugi's room and was clawing at her. And then suddenly the king's tail snapped out and the bird was nothing but a splatter of blood and feathers. Komugi shivered, covered in scratches that slowly oozed blood. Thank you very much. Why didn't you call for help? The king demanded, trembling as he reached her side. He hovered anxiously, the picture-perfect image of a worried friend. I don't think I need to be prepared, Niwa thought as she smiled. He could be faking. You think he is? Niwa stepped in, pulling out her medical scroll. Oh dear. Here, he said, staring at her scratched-up cheek, and here, he took her hand. You're covered in blood. He glared sharply at Niwa, who sat beside Komugi, and pulled out the first aid kit. Niwa gently wiped away the tears and blood on Komugi's face, the king anxiously watching over. Don't worry, said Niwa, offering the king a warm smile. All scratches, she'll be good to go in no time. If you're wrong, I'll kill you. So scary. His tail twitched. Niwa could tell he was itching for an excuse to hit her. Komugi sniffled. Thank you, Niwa. This is what friends do, Niwa dismissed. I flipped out when Killua was hurt earlier, so I understand how the king feels. Do you now? He coldly asked. Sure, she said, clutching at her chest. It feels tight right here, doesn't it? And like you just ate a rock. The king stilled at her description. Kinda shaky, maybe even a little scared, she said, gently tending to Komugi. No one wants to see a friend get hurt. Sorry Komugi. No, you don't need to apologize to me, ow. OW, the king snarled at Niwa. It's just disinfectant, she defended herself. Everyone goes ow when they get disinfected unless they're unconscious. She's right, Supreme Leader, stammered Komugi. Sorry. The king glowered. He growled at Komugi, why didn't you call for help? Because it's early. I didn't want to be a bother. You're not a bother, he snapped. You're an important guest. For some reason his words made Komugi start to cry. Not little tears, rather, big heaping sobs. The king was utterly petrified. He was a deer in headlights as he stared at her. Why are you crying? I'm sorry. But, she hiccuped. No one's ever been this nice to me. Niwa whined at that, and unable to resist, she pulled her into a hug. Shoo. There. Komugi wailed in Niwa's arms, hiccuping and sobbing as Niwa patted her. Pat her back, Niwa told the king. The king startled. What? This is what you do for friends, she told him, reaching forward and taking his hand. She placed it on Komugi's back. There. The king hesitated, then stiffly patted Komugi's back. Niwa beamed. I think I have an honest chance. I think this king's a fucking idiot. SHHHH. This is a sweet moment. Faye. Later that day. The king left after Komugi cried herself to exhaustion. Niwa tucked Komugi, and when she went to check up on the king she found him alone in his throne room. Pretty boring, huh? Commented Niwa. The king did not react. It was plainly obvious he was in a foul mood, and the fact that he did not try to kill her or shoo her away meant he was listening. He reminds me so much of you. Shut up. If you could have smacked me, you would have. I vividly remember you spitefully pumping my body full of your chakra so I couldn't sleep for a week just because. You want me to do that again? Niwa hid her smile. Niwa wandered around the palace, a smile on her face. The king was in a pensive mood, which was excellent news for her. He was upset because of Komugi, because of a human. Niwa couldn't say she successfully befriended the king, but that didn't matter. He clearly liked Komugi, a human, and that gave Niwa hope. Between Komugi being buddies with the king, and Niwa being friends with the guards, maybe they really could persuade the ants to not be pro-human genocide. And if that happened, then, Niwa couldn't stop smiling as she pranced about the palace. She had no real destination in mind. Neferpito was reading a book and Niwa didn't want to pester them. Maybe I can pester someone else? As if the universe was reading her thoughts, Miwa spotted Sheapuff. The butterfly ant gloomily stared up at the sky, leaning on the balcony. His wings and antennae drooped, his expression that of plain hurt. Miwa quietly approached him. He sensed her presence, but he did not turn around to face her. The king. Sheapuff trailed off. He's in a foul mood because of her, isn't he? Yeah, answered Miwa. Sheapuff's face twinged. I do not understand. Why does he care so much for a human? Poof, asked Miwa. If the king cared about you, would you be happy? Of course. So he's okay to care about someone other than himself, she thought. Sheapuff's expression soured. I understand what you're getting at, but you do not understand the main issue. He is our king. He is above humans. To care for one. Sheapuff shuddered. It is not right. It is not right. It is not right. Why? She asked. Because Sheapuff cut himself off, shaking his head as tears streamed down his face. He is our king. I don't understand, Miwa said gently. Upon seeing him cry, the clone reached out a hand to wipe away his tears. Why are you so against your king? I am not against him, snarled Sheapuff, jerking away from her. Everything I do is for him. Is it really? She asked. Then shouldn't you be happy he's making a friend regardless of who or what it is? No. I mean, yes? I mean, Sheapuff's cheeks turned red in frustrated anger. She's a human. So am I, Miwa pointed out. Can we not be friends anymore? We are not friends. We have never been friends. Miwa scratched her cheek. I think we're friends, Sheapuff spluttered. That's absurd. Really? She pressed. Is it really? Sheapuff flinched, tears building up in his eyes. He did not answer right away, and when he did his voice was weaker. It has to be. We can't. Regardless of us, the king should not. The king, repeated Miwa. The way you say that, it sounds like you love the idea of your king, rather than your actual king. Sheapuff turned away from her, hiding his expression as a shudder ran through him. Miwa could hear the plip-plops of tears hitting the pavement as he unashamedly cried. He whispered, his voice hoarse, You're wrong. I love our king. I love. He quivered, then quite suddenly he spread his wings and flew away. You poor child, she thought, leaping after him. He flew to the opposite end of the palace. Even if he wanted to leave, his loyalty to his king would not allow him to wander far without permission. He descended, landing on one of the balconies and falling to his knees as he sobbed. Miwa landed beside him, resting on her knees in front of him. She reached out a hand, carefully and tenderly wiping away at his tears. Sheapuff hiccuped as she moved to pat his head. There, she whispered. It'll be okay. How can you possibly know that? He asked. Because we're friends, she said. Friends help each other. Poof quivered. Poof, have you ever thought about what you want outside the king? She asked. How could I? To even dare to have such thoughts. I don't think it's a bad thing, she said. What if the king no longer wants to be a king? What if he just wants to be himself? Fresh tears cascaded from his eyes. No. Don't say that. He can't without him, Sheapuff shuddered, hugging himself as he bowed forward. What's the point of my existence? What's the point of this? We were born to serve the king. You were born to do whatever you want, Miwa disagreed. You have an identity outside of being a royal guard. I do not, he snapped, trembling. I do not. Miwa continued to pat his head with one hand and wipe away his tears with another. You do. You just need to take the time to look. How could I? He whispered. Alone? All by myself? Miwa smiled at him. Doesn't have to be alone. Sheapuff bowed his head, holding himself tightly as his cries turned into heaping sobs. He fell forward into Miwa's arms, unable to handle the weight of his thoughts by himself anymore. There, she said, gently patting his head. I'm here, my friend. I'll be here for as long as you need or want me. Bonus. Much later. I fucking hate your therapy no jutsu, Kurama complained. Why? What do you mean why? Do you not see anything wrong with the current situation? Miwa shook her head. Shayapuf had been using her lap as a pillow for the past several hours, sniffling and crying intermittently. Miwa had continued to soothe the distressed butterfly ant as best she could. Seriously? You don't see anything wrong with this? Everyone should cry when they need to. He's going to become clingy. Ha! Fucking Yanderas. Oh Karama. Poof isn't a Yandera. Wanna bet? Sure. Ha ha ha. That's it for this reading. Hit like and subscribe for a free ticket pass going to the different worlds of anime fanfiction. Looking forward to having you on board again.